Alright, I think I finally figured out how to do this feedback thing on video, so let's try it. Welcome everyone back to the FliteCast channel. My name is Ray. Thank you so much for joining me for Flight Chat, the listener feedback show for the FliteCast, which up until now had previously only been done in audio only format. This one is now audio and video along with the main show. So that's what I was trying to figure out because it's been 174 days, like almost 6 months, since we've done a feedback show, and they've gotten real long in the past. The last episode we did on like February 15th was like almost 3 hours long, and one of them was like 5.5 hours long. Yeah, longer than Zack Snyder's Justice League. That's long, really long. And there's a handful of emails to get caught up on in the last 6 months or so, but not too many. But yeah, we just need to find a way to do things a little bit more expediently here on video. So yeah, we're going to hopefully do that starting with this particular show because we got to get the feedback going. We've got some new feedback in from this past week because the question that I asked DC fans with respect to MCU envy and whatnot, and also some thoughts on Spider-Man and San Diego Comic-Con that a lot of you have. So let's just dive headfirst into it and get the feedback rolling again. And of course, we have to begin with Mr. Jonathan Rosaler, who definitely has sent the most emails in the last 6 months or so. We're going to go all the way back to an email that he sent on February 16th. Now, that was a rougher time back then, I would say, for John and others. We're dealing with some celebrity deaths and some crazy stuff going on in the world. And he was trying to find some silver linings, he said, and was just suggesting that everybody keep their circles tight and show as much appreciation as you can to the people that you love. So I had some positive messages there to begin, but he did have some questions, and so let's see. A few of these are already outdated, but this one, I don't know how outdated this one is just yet. He's saying, I guess there was some speculation that the Batman Part 2 could be some kind of remake of The Dark Knight. He says, I'm not sure if this is true, but if it's taking inspiration from that film, that wouldn't be surprising, he says. What do you think? I think that would be a little surprising. Is The Dark Knight that old? It's not that old to me. Well, we're talking, 15, 16 years? Hang on, let's do my math here quickly. 13 years, right? No. Hang on. 2026 minus 2000, 14 years, right? Is that the right math? If it's not the right math, I apologize. Point is, it's like a decade and a half, somewhere around there. I don't think that's that long to be remaking that movie. I mean, I think it's easy to suggest that it'll be another crime drama because the TDK trilogy was a series of crime dramas, especially The Dark Knight. The Batman is also a noir crime drama. So, yeah, but I don't think they'll quite... I wouldn't put too much faith into that rumor. I don't think they'll quite take inspiration from a movie that is still that fresh in the minds of fans. I think you got to get, further back. I mean, that would be like rebooting Iron Man now in the MCU. It would be similar to that, right? And I know that we're in a different franchise with DC and it's not connected to the TDK trilogy, but it's still that fresh in the minds of the audience in that regard. So yeah, I would not count on that, John, to be honest with you. He then was asking, he was asking if Paramount's recent developments was going to finally get them somewhere with respect to their acquisition of Warner Brothers. And we now know for a fact that that's not the case because it's been completely frozen in legalities. In fact, they set a court date, I believe, March of 2027 to review the antitrust lawsuits. There's 13 attorneys general that across the country that have filed lawsuit to block it, and they're not going to start those proceedings until March of 2027. So yeah, that's on ice. That is on ice right now. It is not moving forward. We'll see how that develops and what Paramount's decisions are going forward with respect to that. But at the moment, all that we know is that Warner Brothers remains committed to Peter Safran and James Gunn's vision for the DCU despite Supergirl, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about Supergirl here in this feedback as well. All right, so then this next question, this is also probably a bit outdated. I have not seen the movie, Michael, yet, but he was asking if I thought they were going to address his vitiligo, or do I think the film ends before that becomes established? As far as I know, it does. As far as I know, it happens, like the film goes up to 1989, and like the Bad Tour, if I remember correctly. So it's kind of like Ali. I haven't seen the movie yet. It's out on DVD, or it's out on a digital VOD, and also on Blu-ray. But I have not sat down to watch it yet. But as I understand it, it's like Ali, where it doesn't focus on his entire life. It only focuses on certain period of his life, 10, 20 years, something like that. So, and it's gotten glowing reviews from the audience, from people who have seen it. The critics don't like it. And I think the biggest reason the critics haven't cared for it is because it didn't get into the controversial stuff. They want to see the vitiligo and the accusations and everything from the 90s on and whatnot, which, okay, you don't have to do a biopic like that. You can do a biopic however you want. But yeah, as far as I understand, John, it does not address his skin condition. But that was the third question he had way back when. Then he mentioned his fourth question. He's talking about how we're going to get 4 Beatles biopics in 2028, and he was wondering if they're going to address the way that John and George died. And said that he found it hard, that there have been films that have depicted John being shot, said it was hard to watch, and he was expressing concern that he doesn't know if audiences are going to stomach seeing him shot in the back. He saw a YouTuber react to one of John's solo songs, and the video opened with commentators of a football game announcing his death. The YouTuber didn't know that Lennon was murdered, and he was still learning their history, and was distraught by this, as he couldn't imagine a guy spreading a message of love and peace getting killed. Imagine new Beatles fans go on one of these biopics and discover their deaths that way. He also talked about, the historical significance of JFK, and his basic question is, would the general audience be able to handle seeing like those awful depictions in a Beatles biopic, and how would I feel? Could I handle it? I think I would personally handle it okay, John, but I also don't see why you would put those in the hills. I don't think you need to focus on that. I think honestly it would be closer to Selena. I don't know if you've seen the movie Selena, and even that might be a little far, but we never saw her shot. We saw the woman who shot her, and then there was the really emotional scenes of everybody finding out the news afterwards. I don't even know that these will go that far, truthfully. I don't think that these biopics are structured to deal with that at all. I think you'll get some text at the very end saying, "Oh, this is what happened. This is what happened to John. This is what happened to George." I don't think you're going to see it graphically depicted at all, and I don't think we should. And I don't think test audiences won't like that, and I certainly don't think that the general audience will like that either. So no, I don't think we're going to see the depictions of their killings, if you will. I don't think that's going to happen whatsoever. All right, so then he had a couple of quick tidbits. He said he was talking about Weezer and the Beach Boys. Rivers Cuomo, he says, is obsessed with the band. Same way the Gallagher brothers and Nirvana's Kurt Cobain were all obsessed with the Beatles. He and the group even originally wore striped shirts for an alternate cover to their debut Blue album. And then he also said, I don't like it when some people call a certain film I like, I won't name it since it's been a month, one of the worst comic book films of all time. I think they just do it just to troll, but I've been seeing a lot of it on social media lately. I'm assuming it's an anniversary thing. Thankfully, Threads has a new tool to change my algorithm, and now I don't see that nonsense anymore. Yeah, and I stand by what I say. What I have said many times before is that I find it difficult to take you seriously if you call any comic book movie in the last 26 years the worst you've ever seen. Because that tells me you haven't seen a lot of comic book movies. And you certainly haven't seen any from the 80s and 90s. Go back that far. Go back to 80s and 90s and then tell me that there are comic book movies then that are not far worse, subjectively, than anything in the last 26 years. Seriously. And I'm not saying there haven't been some clunkers and some bad ones, subjectively speaking, but no. I can't take you seriously. If you take anything from the shared cinematic universe era, anything Marvel and DC, right? Look, you can feel however you want about those movies, but if you call any of them the worst you've ever seen from the MCU or the DCU or the DCEU, no, I'm sorry. I can't, no. I can't get with you on that one. I would find you someone that is very young. Maybe you were an infant when The Dark Knight was released. I don't know. Just watch some more comic book movies, please. But hey, it's all subjective. Feel however you want. At any rate, so that was all the way back on February 16th. So now let's bump up to February 21st. He sent an email. This is interesting. Am I a manly Nintendo or a Nintendo of a man? Oh, okay, a little poetic there, John. If you remember the 2011 Muppets film, you might get the title. Oh, is that the one with Jason Segel? I think that's the one with Jason Segel. Yeah, I think we've seen that one. He said, been gaming a lot lately and I did something pretty crazy. I bought the Virtual Boy replica for Switch 2. Wow. They made a Virtual Boy replica for Switch? Whoa. I did not know they did that. Okay, or maybe I did and I forgot. But he says, once you find a comfortable spot to actually play the games and you're on Cloud 9, so far the game I found myself going back to the most is Wario Land. Do you remember playing any virtual games? Prior to the Switch 2 launch, I think I played the console maybe 3 times in my 36 years on this planet. Honestly, I gotta give it to Nintendo. They turned something that was a critical and financial disappointment and brought it back in many ways improved upon. And he sent a picture of him, which I don't have here, but he sent pictures of the virtual. I did not even know they made this. No, I cannot immediately recall playing any Virtual Boy games. That was not a Nintendo system that I had. The last Nintendo system that I had was a 64, or at least as far as before I graduating high school. Because I had the Wii and I had the GameCube, and I think that I have a Switch now. I have a 35th Mario and Luigi 35th anniversary Nintendo Switch. I have one of those, but I bought it a number of years after the Switch released. So yeah, no, I've never had this one. That's crazy. And I don't even think I played Wario Land. No, don't think I have. But alright, so that was his Nintendo email from the 21st. Then there's this one that he sent on February 23rd. SK is a monumentally broken piece of shit. Oh. So remember that SK guy, he says, the one that I had Gemini debunk? Well, he has a new video out, and for some reason YouTube recommended me it, titled Wonder Woman 2017 is Awful. Oh, wow, that sounds like a horribly contented video. He says, skimming through his channel, he also thought Spider-Man No Way Home and Deadpool and Wolverine sucked too. Honestly, why do people even listen to this guy? Does he sound like someone who likes comic book movies? Or is he someone who sets himself up for unrealistic expectations? Maybe both. Either way, he can go F himself. I blocked his channel, and I hope I never see his negative ass again. He can wallow in his own misery and pound sand in his parents' basement for all eternity, for all I care. Well, okay, John, Wonder Woman... the first Wonder Woman movie, I should say, not the one, because I keep forgetting 1984. We've had 2 Wonder Woman movies. I know a lot of people like to forget 1984, but it does exist. But the first Wonder Woman movie, Spider-Man No Way Home, and Deadpool and Wolverine are all pretty well, critically and, acclaimed through the audience. So if he's shitting on all of them, then he's just doing it for rage bait. He's just doing it to seem like a contrarian because he thinks that's going to get him the most, numbers, followers, it's going to attract the most attention because people are attracted to negative attention and people bitching and moaning about shit that is otherwise popular, right? Because he can say, oh, it's overhyped and I'm giving you the real deal. I'm giving you my honest opinion. No, you're not. You're not. You're just placating assholes that love to be negative. You're placating misery at that point. So it's a good thing to block him. It's a good thing. Don't pay attention to people like that. People that farm negativity just for attention, just to get clicks, just to get subscribers. Yeah, that's nobody that any of us need to pay attention to. And I'm sorry. I guarantee there's somebody out there that does dislike all 3 of those movies. But if they have a YouTube channel and are actively going into those movies, just so they can hate them, that's bullshit. That's manipulative behavior. You can't tell me otherwise. Because I'm sorry. Anybody that, if you hate those movies, you probably don't have a YouTube channel, because why would you need to spread your hatred and your misery about them to others? You would just not watch them and move on with your life like rational human beings. So, yeah. Let's never talk about that SK guy ever again. I'm good with that. And now I completely agree with your title. Monumentally broken piece of shit, yes. Let's see. So he did send one on March 2nd, which at the time he said would be his last that he sent for the next show. With respect to the video stuff, he said a few tidbits. His thoughts on the Happy Confused podcast with Zach. That's right, Zack Snyder was on Josh Horowitz's Happy Sad Confused podcast. I did watch that. He said there's nothing he said to Horowitz that was wrong, not one. Yeah, I agree. No, it was a phenomenal interview. Thoroughly enjoyed it. He said he was going into Japan in June with Tammy, something he's been longing to do for over 20 years. All the years of looking at flights, looking at things to do, the dream finally comes to fruition. Well, I hope it was a good trip, because June is over, so hopefully it was a good trip for you, John. So many things up in the air with the Paramount merger. Yeah, well, let's see what happens legally. We don't need to go to any further speculation with respect to that. At any rate, so I think that was it for that particular email. So now let's move on to where's his next one? Does he have a recent one? Here we go. How about this? Monday, June 29th. He's got it. Here we go. A debunking, or a debriefing, if you will, with respect to his Japan trip. He went to Hawaii and Japan. Let's see. Third time visiting Hawaii, 9 days. My goodness. Went to Kona. He went to Oahu this time after going to Kona and Hilo. Am I saying that right? I don't know. But he said that it got off to a bit of a rough start. After struggling to locate the rideshare pickup zone, I gave up and hopped into a traditional taxi. Not only was it incredibly expensive, but the real tragedy struck when my smiley face push button pin snapped right off my lanyard. Oh, that sucks. Vanished into the depths of the cab, never to be seen again. I'm sorry. That's unfortunate. The good, Turtles, Monks, and Rock and Roll, oh my. Day 2 completely turned things around, he said. We spent some quality time relaxing at the Hard Rock Cafe and hitting the beach. Absolute highlight of our brief stay was catching glimpses of local sea turtles and Hawaiian monk seals resting near the shore. After a quick meet-up with some of my girlfriend's friends, we headed to the airport for a 9 a.m. flight to Narita. Next stop, the future. All right, so then part 2, Japan. He said it was only the 4th country he's ever visited. Following Canada, Israel, and Mexico, cultural shift was immediate and thrilling, he said. Right after clearing customs, they were approached by a local Japanese TV channel that interviews tourists about their travel plans. They spent an hour in their hotel room later trying to find themselves on the broadcast, even though they aren't entirely sure if they made the final cut. Watching the show was an experience in itself. Well, that's cool. Your 15 minutes of almost fame, as he put it. That's awesome. But now that was the good. The bad and the ugly, he says, the Tokyo Gauntlet. He says navigating Tokyo's subway system and figuring out the different ticketing and payment structures was a stressful crash course in Japanese transit. Yikes. We were lucky we got to Tokyo Tower. To make matters worse, the weather didn't cooperate. We got caught in a downpour, and while trying to let my hat dry out later, it got lost. Oh, I'm sorry. That sucks. A couple of days later, an umbrella and my Tammy's wallet vanished too. Luckily, she was a superstar and canceled her cards immediately, but it definitely tested our patience. Oh yeah, that's awful. You lose your hat and your wallet. Ridiculous. Sorry to hear that the trip took an unfortunate turn there. As a retro gaming fan, he says, I went on a mission across 3 different stores looking for a rare Game Boy Light. While that specific hardware proved too elusive to find, I didn't leave empty-handed. I scored a Japanese copy of Wario Land, Super Mario Land 3, the Pokemon Heartbreak. Pokemon Heartbreak. He's got subheads on this. Pokemon Heartbreak is the title for his next dealio here. I've never played Wario Land, Super Mario Land 3, just as a brief aside. The last Super Mario Land game I played was Mario Land 2, which I never beat, because it's hard. Really hard. But what was the Pokemon Heartbreak? He says, as an avid Pokemon Go player, I was thrilled to encounter an alternative form of the Pokemon Sock, aka a shiny Pokemon on the train ride. Because it's a regional exclusive to the Eastern Hemisphere, this was a massive deal, but fate was cruel. The train was moving so fast, the game's speed cap kicked in. After one throw, the shiny sock broke free and instantly fled. The heartbreak was real. I spent hours in our hotel room trying to hunt down a replacement, catching over 60 regular socks. While the trauma remains, the universe offered a small consolation prize later. I caught a shiny Pansage, and my partner caught a shiny Volbeat. Shiny sock will be my white whale, but one day it will be mine. All right, well, Digital Captain Ahab, I'm sorry that it got away from you, John, but I know that, more than a few, Phil and a few others that play Pokemon like that probably understand your heartbreak far more than I do, truthfully, but I get it to an extent. But here we go. Here's some news. Ultimate highlights. He says they're engaged. Despite the rainy days and lost items, the highs of the trip completely obliterated the lows. The absolute peak of the entire 9 days happened at Tokyo Disneyland, where we got engaged. To celebrate, we hopped over to the neighboring park a couple of days later to pick up matching rings. Well, congratulations on your engagement, John. Congratulations. That's really good news. Awesome. That's the highlight, right? That is the highlight of your 9-day trip, without question. It says they ate plenty of incredible traditional Japanese food, but were fascinated by how American chains adapted over there. Embarked on a culinary tour of KFC, McDonald's, Panda Express, Sizzler, 7-Eleven, and Costco. In Costco, Japan, they serve margarita pizza, and it is life changing. American Costco needs to take notes immediately. I don't know if we can handle margarita pizza over here. I don't know. That sounds too delicious. The Sizzler next to Shinjuku Toho Cinema, a Sizzler located in a shopping mall which featured giant, iconic Godzilla statue with a Michael movie poster dropped under it. We initially bought tickets to see Scream 7 there just to experience the theater, but realized the timing would make us miss the last train back to our hotel. After getting a quick refund, we managed to see Masters of the Universe at a different theater the next day after checking out a park with Buddhist temples. Whoa. All right. Godzilla statues would be cool to see in person, especially over there. Between Geek Culture Havens featuring Nintendo, Sega, Toho, and Shonen Jump, we were in paradise, he says. But if there is one image that will stay with me forever, it's the view from our hotel room overlooking Tokyo Bay. Looking out at that water made every lost pin, lost hat, and escaped Pokemon completely worth it. Well, that's good. That's really good. I appreciate that. And he sent a bunch of pictures. He had a Kirin beer. He sent pictures of their ring. Congratulations once again, John. Let's see. He says, I'm beyond numb to the polarizing DC movie discourse. I finally left X, and I'm likely going to be leaving Threads for good. He left temporarily. He's back on. And he says they moved into their own place in San Jose. All right, yeah, and he's got a little bit of the he posted his review of Supergirl, which he said is not as good as Superman, but the components of the film makes him want to see more of the characters. He wants to see Kara and Man of Tomorrow, wants a Lobo spinoff. He says it's not the most compelling story, but I think I got a good sense of who she is. So that's definitely a more positive review of Supergirl for sure, and we're seeing more and more of those as more people are seeing the movie online, VOD, and certainly after it breaks on HBO Max, probably the next month or so, to be honest with you. On top of that, he sent an image he titled this, When Kara Finds Out Lex Dognapped Crypto. And a few people have talked about this. People have suggested that if Kara ever finds out that Lex tortured her dog, this particular image is her basically heat blasting his ass, saying heat vision focused. Yeah, no, it will take Clark, it will take everything within Clark to keep her from killing him if she ever finds that out. I would agree with that. I don't know if that's going to come up in Man of Tomorrow. I kind of hope it does, because I want to see that happen, truthfully. But yeah, I definitely agree with that. So that was going all the way up to July 12th. So now we come to July 31st, the most recent email that Jonathan Rosaler sent, which is, do we know for sure if a well is poisoned, and if so, can it be salvaged? He says, good to have the show back, but he says he posted this particular deal. What is this from? Oh, his reviews of Spider-Man Brand New Day. Says there was way too much hype for this. It was a good Spider-Man film, not a great one, but that's okay. We had plenty of those. I enjoyed it for what it was, not what it was trying to be, he says. I think they did a lot of things that were long overdue for a Spidey flick. If you think it's the best Spider-Man movie, best MCU film, best comic book film even, hey, more power to you. It's another Spider-Man film, but I mean that in the best way possible. It didn't change my life, nor did it need to. I was entertained for 2 hours and 15 minutes, 7.9 out of 10. Are you saying you left after the credits, or before the credits rolled? It's fine. There wasn't a mid-credit scene, and the end credit wasn't even a scene. It was just a tease for where we're going to see Spider-Man X, so I totally get that. But that was his Brand New Day review. He says, I'm glad it's your favorite Marvel movie. I couldn't quite reach that plateau for it. In fact, I keep juggling which is the best MCU film for me. Winter Soldier, Iron Man, and Infinity War seem to constantly battle for that too, he says. And I know I've been dragged through the mud, not making this my favorite Marvel film or hell favorite Spider-Man film, and I'm just not there. There's some things that kept it from beating films like Spider-Man 2, the Spider-Verse films, and No Way Home for me. I liked some directions they went. I even appreciated how Punisher was handled in the film, he says. But at the end of the day, it is all subjective. I'm sure some people are just thinking I'm butthurt because of how the critics and fan circles treated Supergirl, even though I think Brand New Day is technically better. I just like them both for different reasons. Yeah, there's no reason, people, like I have a coworker, I knew going in when he finally saw the movie that he wasn't going to have it as high on his list as I have mine. And look, there are plenty of people out there that still have Spider-Man 2 rated higher, still think that No Way Home is higher. Listen, it is all subjective. I don't make my determination lightly. I said what I said after a good deal of thought, after absorbing the movie the first time and then seeing it a second time a couple days later with Shonda, just reinforced my belief. And I am steadfast on that. I feel that way about it, that I do think it's the best Spider-Man film made to date, and it's the best MCU film made to date. Those are my subjective opinions. You don't have to agree. I'm not going to drag you through the mud for that. Of course, I know you know that I'm not going to do that, but there's no need for anybody to do that, truthfully, to be honest with you. I mean, you didn't say you hated the movie. You weren't being rude. You weren't being mean about it, right? So there's no reason. If you're not being an asshole about it, there's no reason to drag anybody for your opinion, your subjective opinion in that regard. He says it is lousy how fan communities think these two films are even remotely fair to compare in context to where the characters are, where their franchises are, and the expectations people have for them are. Even if Man of Tomorrow earns $1 billion, they're going to migrate the goddamn goalpost with Secret Wars next year. Yeah, and he's talking about people comparing Supergirl and Spider-Man Brand New Day, which is that there is no comparison. Like, when I say there's no comparison, I don't say that's because Spider-Man is light years better. Yeah, I do think it's a better film, but you're literally comparing movie 2 Supergirl in the DCU to movie 38 in the MCU. That's even dumber than the original, trying to catch up with Marvel arguments from 10 years ago. Like, that's what this year kind of feels like. It feels like people are regurgitating the old bullshit arguments they had between the DCEU and the MCU from 2016. They're trying to rehash it now. And, Marvel fanboys love to get their chests puffed out whenever they hit a big milestone. But the fact of the matter is, and I've talked about this before, Marvel needs Spider-Man way more than Spider-Man needs Marvel. Spider-Man Brand New Day's box office does not prove that Marvel is king of anything. It proves that Spider-Man is God tier in terms of popularity in that regard. And that's the only thing you can draw from that. You can't say the MCU is back, because for one thing, the MCU never left, and for the other thing, you can't ignore the previous films in terms of their box office. If you're going to take up that argument, for me subjectively, I've had a hell of a lot of fun watching the Multiverse Saga, and I knew I was going to enjoy this particular Spider-Man film, and I'm probably going to enjoy Avengers Doomsday. There's very little in the MCU that I don't enjoy, but I'm also not trying to win arguments and act like an asshole with respect to box office. If you're going to do that, you're going to get humbled, because it just doesn't make any sense trying to argue any of that shit with box office. It's a dumb comparison, and seriously, comparing Incredible Hulk to this, that's what you're doing, right? Because Incredible Hulk, second film in the MCU, you're not going to compare that to Brand New Day. You're not even going to compare it to Civil War like 10 years ago. So it's stupid. It's a stupid thing for people to do, and those people need to be ignored and blocked that are doing that. He says, sorry, I don't mean to sound like a negative Nancy. When I asked the question about the poison well, I'm of course talking about social media. The former owners of MySpace are considering bringing it back. I do long for the day to return to a platform where I don't have to deal with nonsensical algorithms. Yeah, I've heard about the potential MySpace return. It'll be interesting. We'll see how that goes. I remember what happened the first time. How will it adjust to how social media has changed everything, how that landscape has completely transformed now? We'll find out, I guess. But he said also, I really enjoyed The Odyssey. I think it's probably Nolan's second or third best film outside of the Dark Knight films. Intriguing, because I don't have the Dark Knight films ranked that high on his list. I think Christopher Nolan's best work has been outside of superheroes. And he's done more than enough now outside of superheroes in order to rank that high. I think The Odyssey is his best film. I've said that. And, up there I would rank Oppenheimer. I would say Inception, which is my personal favorite of his. I would say The Prestige. I would say Memento. Like, I can get to a top 5 before I even get into Batman Begins, which I think is the best film in the TDK trilogy. And I know I'm on an island with that, but I don't care. Tim, a good podcast brother over at Squadcast Media, he's on that island with me. But yeah, I think The Odyssey is tops, and I can think of 4 or 5 other films before even getting to the TDK trilogy, in my humble opinion. I almost forgot that John did answer my question that I asked DC fans about MCU envy on this most recent episode of the FliteCast. I did ask that question, and he did answer it with respect to thoughts on the DCU, but he answered it on YouTube. He didn't send an email. He says, you're right, we don't need to rush Batman. Let Reeves do his own thing, and then later on they can focus on Brave and the Bold, We also know Wonder Woman is in active development. If people want to check out of the DCU because we're getting lesser known heroes along the journey, there's no helping them, he says. Although I will say I do hate the box office comparisons now more than ever. Yeah, originally it was a sore loser reason, but after writer's strike I realized there was no dog worth putting in that fight. It does make me hope MySpace's comeback is a success. It would be nice to have a platform that doesn't have inflammatory rhetoric algorithms again. Alright, so those are John's thoughts with respect to the MCU envy and whatnot. He doesn't sound like he has any. He hates the box office comparisons. Yeah, I despise them too. They're awful. They're no good whatsoever at all. But, and yeah, Batman can take its time, and we've had so much Batman content, movies and show wise and animated wise, that we don't need to be in a rush for the Brave and the Bold. And I'm not even in a rush for Batman Part 2, truthfully. I mean, February 2028, cool. It's not like I'm not going to go see it. Of course I'm going to go see it. And anybody that claims they're not going to because that's too far away, they're lying. You're going to go see it. Batman, similar to Spider-Man and just like Superman, is one of those heroes that that will sell tickets, will bring people to the theater. Always has and probably always will, truthfully. Is that it for John's emails? Yes, I think we are done with John's feedback. Going all the way back to February. So there we go. All right. Thank you very much, John, for your feedback. Indeed, it is always greatly appreciated, good sir. And we'll get back on track here, for sure. All right, let's go back to February for a bit and continue our catch-up here. Waliu Mustapha sent an email way back on February 20th. We'll see how outdated some of this stuff is, because the title of it was Year of the Horse, no, more like Month of Snyder. And he said he wanted to quickly touch on Zack Snyder, because at the time he'd been posting a lot on Instagram, and he said the nostalgia I'm getting from seeing images from BVS, Man of Steel, and Justice League is just wild. Of course, he's busy working on his latest project, The Last Photograph, starring Frafi. I might check that out. Yeah, I'm definitely going to check that out. And that's what real Snyder fans are doing, right? Real, actual, human, rational Zack Snyder fans are waiting on his next project. They're not posting about the Snyderverse on social media. They're not posting anti-James Gunn sentiments. They're not being toxic pieces of shit. Those are the bots, those are the trolls, and those are the rage baiters that are trying to piss everybody off that are doing that. Not the actual living, breathing Snyderverse fans. I don't care how many people agree with me on that or not. It remains the truth, whether they accept it or not. Real Zack Snyder fans have moved on. They really have. But at any rate, he said the reason I wanted to talk about Zack is that this year we have a bit of a double celebration. It will be 5 years since the release of Zack Snyder's Justice League on March 18th. Yep, it was. And then 10 years since Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice came out on March 26th. I have no idea if he has anything planned for them. I think he did some image releases, but there was nothing big. He doesn't necessarily have to, he says, given that he's busy, but it would be interesting to see if he or maybe even James Gunn does something to celebrate both movies' anniversaries. I don't remember if Gunn did anything or not, truthfully. But he said what's even more freaky is that HBO Max is finally coming to the UK, and it arrives on March 26th. It feels like it's too late for the service. For me personally, I know why it took this long, because Warner Brothers had a deal with Sky TV in the UK to showcase their HBO shows on a channel called Sky Atlantic, and through an app called Now. That's how people were able to see shows like Westworld and Game of Thrones the day after they aired in the US. When HBO Max was released in the US, it was only a matter of time before it came to our shores. Pricing starts at $4.99 a month, GBP, for the basic ad-supported version, up to $14.99 for the 4K UHD version, considerably cheaper than Netflix. We'll see if it stays that way if the deals go ahead. But as he said, I won't be subscribing, as I've been watching shows via non-conventional means, as everything is so damn expensive these days. He probably still hasn't subscribed, even some months after that. But for anyone who does want to subscribe to the service, he says, have at it. I would urge you to watch all the DC stuff. Actually, now that I have said that, should they decide to do some kind of free trial or deal for HBO Max, I might just jump on it. That would give me a good excuse to rewatch shows from the DCCW and the Arrowverse. One and the same, yes, for sure. Because it has been a long time since I rewatched any of those shows. Same here. I never finished The Flash, or Legends of Tomorrow, or Black Lightning, or Supergirl. I think only Arrow. Arrow and Superman and Lois. Arrow and Superman and Lois are the only actual DCCW/Arrowverse shows that I actually finished. Crazy. But yeah, I'd love to finish those at some point. He says, speaking of, I was watching Smallville on Amazon Prime Video and I got to Season 8, Episode 1, only to find that they have now moved Smallville to the paid section of Prime Video. Oh, yeah. I've heard of that being a thing, where stuff that was originally like open on Prime Video got moved to the paid section. In fact, I got a little burned on that as well. I'm a fan of the Bob Newhart show because I love old sitcoms, especially MTM, classic sitcoms from the 70s. And during the pandemic in 2020, during work from home, I actually binged through all 6 seasons of the Bob Newhart show for the first time on Hulu because they were available. Since then, they've moved to Amazon, but I just found out like last year when I tried to watch the episodes again, they got moved to the paid section as well, and they're not on Hulu anymore. So I'm screwed with respect to that. At some point, I do want to actually own that series. They haven't released it on Blu-ray; they've only released it on DVD. But I might bite the bullet because I don't know that that's ever going to get a Blu-ray remaster. It's such an old show, so I might bite the bullet and like get a DVD copy of that. Shot Factory makes one for like $50. The whole show. It's a great show, but I've had that happen to me before, where they've moved stuff from regular Amazon to like paid Amazon, like for the video content. So yeah, that sucks. But he says, looks like HBO Max to the rescue. I know it's on Netflix, Smallville he's talking about, but I don't even have that anymore. As I said, everything is so damn expensive. Anyway, it'll be interesting to see what the numbers will be in terms of subscriptions for HBO Max in the UK. I wonder what movie or show will be the most streamed in the first month. I'm betting on Superman and Game of Thrones. What I really need is a weekend all by myself so I can watch Zack Snyder's trilogy back to back to back. Sure, I have them on physical media, but sometimes just whacking on the streaming app and hitting play feels good. Yeah, the convenience of the digital library, the digital access, even when you have the physical at your disposal, is definitely a benefit. Like it certainly makes things easier for access in that regard. Wow, everything that I just said could have been interpreted so dirty in the last minute or so. But either way, he says, just realized that HBO Max might also be a good idea for Micah and Estelle. Those are Waliu's 2 kids. Micah has been enjoying a lot of Disney Plus content of late. He loves Monsters Inc., Frozen, and Spidey and His Amazing Friends, which features Miles Morales and Gwen Stacy, but it might be worth getting HBO Max so they can watch the likes of Justice League Action or DC Superhero Girls. It can't just be all Spider-Man content in this house. They forget who their father is a fan of, LOL. Yeah, no, they gotta get in line, that's for sure. Spider-Man may be globally the most popular hero on the planet, but in Waliu's home, that is Kal-El, okay? Kal-El of Krypton, last son of Krypton, Clark Kent. That is the Superman household. He is the biggest. He is our Superman, our resident Superman superfan by far. So yeah, those kids better better shape up in that regard for sure. They can still love Spider-Man. That can be their Marvel favorite, but Superman clearly has got to be their DC favorite in that house. At the time, he said, I still have not started Wonder Man. I don't know if that's changed. He said he was going to try and binge watch the show. Had to skip Alex De Silva's review of Predator Badlands for any spoilers, as he has yet to watch it. Again, might do that weekend, or should that be, I might try. I don't know. We'll have to see if he mentions that. He's got a sooner email coming up here. But he says, to answer the question about the hoodie I was wearing in the pic with Charlie Hunnam. Oh yeah, he sent this one of our last Flight Chat emails way back, Flight Chat episodes way back when. He has a picture with Charlie Hunnam. He says it's not embroidered, just stitched on. I've had it for almost a decade. I think I bought it when BVS was released, so yeah, a decade. Yikes, has it been that long? Yeah, BVS is a decade long. Crazy. I keep saying I need to have a clear out of old clothes I no longer wear, don't fit me anymore, but alas, ADHD brain. I hear you. I hear you on that. And then this next paragraph, he was talking about seeing the trailer for The Mandalorian and Grogu. That, of course, is outdated because we've all seen that movie. But he enjoyed the trailer, was excited for the movie to come out. And then he says, to quickly add to sports and the blackout I mentioned that we have over here, yeah, it does suck. We can't watch any 3 p.m. matches in the UK. Yet if you live in New Zealand, for example, you can watch them. Very weird. I mean, I kind of get it. You probably don't live in the UK anymore and still want to keep an eye on your team, but at least we still get to watch other matches outside of the 3 p.m. blackout. And then he had some Ramadan Mubarak and Happy Lent. That's how long ago this email was. As a former Muslim, he says he knows how hard fasting can be. Hope those of you observing, hopefully they did it safely. And then, of course, Happy Chinese New Year for the Year of the Horse, which goes to the title of his email, which was Year of the Horse, no, more like Month of Snyder. So that was Waliu's email that he sent way back on February 20th. The next most recent email that he sent, well, he sent a couple. How about this one? Let's see. Here we go. Oh, a quick one. He wanted to know if I was going to do a Sun Just Don't rant about what happened at the BAFTAs. He said, because boy, does that need some unpacking and then some. If you don't do a Sun Just Don't, then Flight Speed will be fine. For people who don't know, Sun Just Don't is a rant show that I've done on the Patreon before, the FliteCast Patreon, where basically I find something that really pisses me off and I rant about it heavily and uncensored. And yeah, I could have done one about the BAFTAs. I don't think I did. I don't remember if I did or not. It was a while ago. But yeah, the whole shit, with the racism and the very unfortunate treatment of both Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo, that's what he's talking about. It certainly deserved a couple of rants, to be honest with you, because it was beyond unacceptable. The BAFTAs definitely needed to be ashamed of themselves for how that whole bullshit went down. But then he also said, he has watched Wonder Man, and he says, I can see why it was rated so highly. I really enjoyed it, and it went to places I hadn't expected it to go. Whilst I thought the ending was a cliffhanger, I've been advised it was more of a setup for a potential second season, which, of course, we now know is not going to happen. That's another development that has occurred since Waliu wrote this email back on February 28th. We know that Wonder Man is not getting a second season. We found that out recently, which a lot of people are not happy about whatsoever. I have not seen Wonder Man yet. It's on my MCU catch-up. I'm going to go through all the shows. I know that I don't need to. The only show that I know I need to watch for Doomsday is Loki Season 2, because I've got to find out where he is before going into that movie. I know I don't need to get caught up on Agatha All Along or Wonder Man or any of the others, but I will. I will, because I'm a completionist. And I can't forget Vision Quest. Brent reminded me Vision Quest is out this year, so I got to watch that one too. So I got a lot of Marvel TV in the future to get caught up on here in the next 4 months or so. And then he also wanted to know what my thoughts were about Zack Snyder's interview on Happy, Sad, Confused. I think I did post something about it, but again, this was earlier this year. Unfortunately, I cannot remember. I am sorry, Wally, but I did enjoy the interview, like I was mentioning earlier in John's email. I did enjoy the interview quite a bit, and I like Horowitz. Josh Horowitz does a good job with his interviews. Happy, Sad, Confused is a good show. He's had a number of people, mutuals and whatnot, or not mutuals, but like mutual interests, if you will, right? Whether it's James Gunn or Zack Snyder, like he said, both of them on his shows before, and yeah, no, he's good. He's really good. I like his show, for sure. So then the last email that Waliu sent was on March 6th, titled In Brightest Day, and that was for the premiere of the first Lanterns trailer, which was not even the longer one that we got the week of San Diego Comic-Con. But he said it was out of this world, loved the grittiness, the chemistry between Kyle and Aaron, the costume, the ring, heck, the battery. He says this show is going to be amazing. I kind of had a feeling it would release in August. Supergirl out in June, Spider-Man out in July, so it made sense to release this show in August. Yeah, that's a good point. And with it being a weekly episode release, it will take us up to the run-up. It will take us to the run-up to the release of Clayface. He says, not a bad few months to spend enjoying some much-needed comic book entertainment. Yes, that is true. That Lanterns will take us up to Clayface, and not that we're expecting any, direct connective tissue, but they are all in the same universe. So that'll be cool to have some DCU content consistently leading through October. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, no doubt. Then he says, and for those complaining, either go read a Green Lantern comic book or wait for the show to be fully released until you make your judgment. Y'all are too impatient or lacking common sense. Anyway, the less said about them, the better. Yeah, and that didn't get any quieter with the other trailer, the newer trailer, the longer trailer that was released. More people are excited for Lanterns, but the usual suspects that complain about every damn thing and want to spread their misery. Yeah, you know who they are, you know what they say. So you're right. Less said about them, the better. He said, I said in my first email that March is the month of Snyder. Of course, it was Zach's birthday on the 1st, but I just remembered that Daredevil Born Again Season 2 is out on March 24th, 2 days before the 10th anniversary of BVS. Even more reason to be excited about this month. Yeah, I didn't watch that either. That's part of my catch-up, too. I don't know what happened. I got super behind on, everything. There's too much shit to watch. I've said that before, Waliu. There's way too much. People that complain about TV shows here and movies there, and it's like, you know what? I don't want to hear your complaints because I haven't even watched a single second of Apple TV shows, and that's like the haven for awesome science fiction now, right? Foundation, Severance, Isn't that kind of science fiction, right? Silo, like a sea, like like there are whole apps that I haven't watched stuff on, and no, I have not gotten a chance to watch season 2 of Daredevil Born Again. So I'm in the dark on that one. I'm in the bubble on that one, if you can believe that. As much as I've been on Threads, I just don't post about Daredevil, so I don't give the algorithm a reason to throw it into my radius. So I have no idea. There's one thing. There's one thing that I know happens in Born Again season 2, and it's, I guess, big. It involving the demise of a character that I didn't think was necessarily going to meet a demise, right? As I understand it, we don't need to. No one needs to tell me. I'll find out later, like when I do my catch up here. But yeah, I got some catching up to do. That's for sure. He had Formula One starting in Australia back then, so he was looking forward to that. Said he was behind on Starfleet Academy. That's right, because that was going at that time, right? And then he was going to be starting season 2 of Monarch Legacy of Monsters soon. I haven't seen any of that. That's another one. Isn't that an Apple show? That's another Apple show that I haven't watched. Oh, and then there's this. He says we got the final trailer for the final season of The Boys, and oh boy, we're going out on a high this season. Stakes are even higher than before. Old scores will be settled. Hurry up and finish the last 2 seasons and get Gen V watched. Yeah, that still hasn't happened. That still hasn't happened either. Yeah, I still haven't watched the last 2 episodes of season 3 of The Boys. I have not watched any of season 4 or 5, and I haven't watched any of Gen V. I am completely in the bubble with respect to The Boys the last couple of years. And I aim to stay that way unless somebody really wants to be a prick and ruin it for me. Hasn't happened yet, and this is the last time I will mention it until I've actually watched it, because I don't wish for that to go out into the airwaves and have some dickless piece of shit ruin it for me. I really don't want that to happen, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes, because time is of the essence. But that was the last email that Waliu sent, so hopefully we can get everything back on track here. As always, thank you for the feedback, Waliu. Sorry for the 5 to 6 months of delay, but we got all caught up, good sir. So next up is Stuart Little, and the last email that he sent was on Friday, February 20th, and it's just titled Game On. Let's see, he says, oh, you haven't seen Highlander, Ray? And as a Scot and a fan of that franchise as a whole, check out my episode of the Love, as a Scot and fan of that franchise as a whole, check out my episode of the I Love That Movie podcast on the original. Let me talk a little bit about it. You talked to Lisa about this one? Damn. I think I probably knew that, but either way, was it Lisa? I'm sorry, I don't remember. Was that her name on I Love Movie? That I Love Movie podcast. I was never on that show. I wish I had been, because I remember Jordan did a show or did an episode talking about Clue, and I think some of the others have been on that show as well. I never got a chance to be on that show. I always wanted to talk about to pick a favorite movie to talk about, but either way. He said the first Highlander is a great cult fantasy action movie with a novel plot and a great cast. Christopher Lambert's brooding and hard-to-place vocal stylines make him great as a centuries-old warrior protagonist. Clancy Brown's a bit theatrical and fun villain as the Kurgan, and Sean Connery's twinkling charisma as the mentor figure gives the movie a bit of a bigger feel. The movie also explores the immortality thing with a number of flashbacks to various time periods and locales in Connor's life, including an obligatory World War II action scene. Russell Mulcahy's background as a music video director gives the film cool style, and we also have tremendous benefit of the band Queen contributing a number of songs to the soundtrack, including the movie's theme. Then he says Highlander 2 The Quickening is very derided as it takes things into a futuristic sci-fi setting and introduces a bunch of cosmic backstory to the lore that has since been pretty much ignored. I do think there's great visual effects, though, and a few fun moments, like the scene where immortality is used to survive a ridiculously large hail of bullets. Also, we get the benefit of a main antagonist being played by Michael Ironside. Yes, film 1 had Lex Luthor as the villain, film 2 had Darkseid. Well, animated. Both of them animated, too. That's crazy. Highlander 3 The Sorcerer was a back-to-basics approach and in a lot of ways rehashing the first movie, but did have the novel addition of more explicit magic being in possession of the villain, played by Mario Van Peebles, who understood the assignment that Highlander villains have to be over-the-top scenery chewers. After that, he says, the movies are part of the alternative timeline of the Highlander TV series, which, while a good episodic show, doesn't really fit the first film's continuity by acknowledging Connor MacLeod, Lambert appeared in the pilot episode, but having his cousin Duncan be the protagonist and somehow producing a bunch of other immortals, even though that shouldn't be possible with the original's events. Highlander Endgame has both Highlanders as dual protagonists and gives Connor a definitive ending, while Highlander the Source, which I've never seen, he says, is apparently total trash. I am looking forward to the reboot, though, he says, as the director of the John Wick series should be able to handle a movie about fights to the death between people who exist in secret underneath the surface of the real world. The cast always great looking too. Next, alright, so those are his thoughts with respect to Highlander, pardon me. He didn't put a paragraph break, so I was about to jump into his next topic with respect to that. But that's Stu's basic primer on Highlander. At this point, I can tell you I will definitely see the first film. I'm in possession of the first film. Lionsgate Limited did a steelbook that I think is since out of print that I did get. I want to say either last year or earlier this year, because I definitely do collect from Lionsgate Limited. So I have it. I just haven't watched it yet. I will at some point, and hopefully maybe do a FLITE review on that, to be honest with you. So stay tuned for that. And then, of course, the reboot with Henry Cavill, certainly, for sure. Want to check that out. He says, next, have you noticed we're seeing a renaissance in terms of video game adaptations in film and TV? The Sonic movies, the Mario movies, The Last of Us, Fallout, Minecraft, the various animated efforts like Secret Level, Castlevania, Tomb Raider, and recent indie hit Iron Lung. And more to come, like a Tomb Raider live-action series, God of War, Zack Cregger's Resident Evil reboot, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat 2, and the in-development Claire Obscure Expedition 33 and Chad Stahelski's eventual Ghosts of Tsushima adaptation. There's a much larger success rate than there's ever been, perhaps because these things are being made by a generation who actually grew up playing games, so understand the appeal of the IPs more, not to mention the level of writing in the games these days is far more developed than it's ever been. There's also still disappointments, he says, like the Halo series, Borderlands, and the recent Silent Hill movie, but that just puts video game movies in a similar standing to most genres. Not all good, not all bad. Subjectively speaking, of course, he says. Any video games you think could translate well to the big or small screen, other than Mass Effect, which is already in development, that is. Take care, Stu. Well, I would say that, first of all, to go to your point in terms of the success rate for video game movies being higher, I think it probably is due in part both to what you said about the generation that played video games is now actually the ones making these movies, that they're taking them more seriously as far as, being closer to the source material and taking them more seriously as a film, as opposed to just trying to get an adaptation out there for dollars. But also, I'd also agree the writing has improved. That's what we saw, I think, with the Alicia Vikander Tomb Raider movie from some years ago. That was a good movie. That was a legitimately good movie, and it was disappointing that it didn't do better than it ended up doing at the box office, because it really was I think a better Tomb Raider adaptation than even the Angelina Jolie films from well before then. And again, I think it is part of, millennials, elder millennials and whatnot, and maybe younger Gen X are, taking charge on these films and are saying, okay, no, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to take this seriously, we're going to take that seriously. With respect to what I think would be a good adaptation, I got to go through, let's see, what hasn't been mentioned here. I tell you what, they've talked about Len Wiseman. Len Wiseman, of course, the director of the Underworld movies, and also directed Ballerina, the John Wick spinoff. So he knows, like, Stahelski and, like, the guys involved with that series. They've talked about him doing a Gears of War movie for a minute, and that would be cool. That'd be really cool to see a Gears of War movie. It'd be very R-rated, be very bloody, be very foul-mouthed, but it'd be fun. It'd be a lot of fun. I think they could do a real good job with the Gears of War film. That feels like one that's been talked about. I feel like if you were to do the satire in an intriguing way, you could do Grand Theft Auto. I know people look at Grand Theft Auto and go, oh, well, there's a ton of crime movies, there's a ton of it. There's a way that you could do Grand Theft Auto, where you could actually make Liberty City come to life and keep all the parodies there, right? Make it a real satirical look at the world that we live in and do it that way, right? Don't just make it a straight up crime movie or a straight or like generic action film or generic crime film or whatever. Go the satirical route and take all the in-jokes and all of the little allegories that they place within the game, right? And this is coming from somebody that has not played 5. Last one I played religiously was 4, right? I'm sure there's even more stuff in 5 when I eventually do play it. But yeah, I think Grand Theft Auto, if taken in that direction, could be done well. I also wouldn't mind them seeing them try their hand at Assassin's Creed again. Do something that is closer to the actual game as opposed to what they did. With and mind you, I guess I'm not being totally fair on that because I haven't seen the Michael Fassbender one. I haven't seen that film. But from what I saw of it, like from the bits and pieces of it, it didn't seem like it was, I wasn't seeing Ezio out there, like the Ezio Auditore trilogy and the Apple and some of the stuff with the Templars and the Assassins and whatnot. It didn't quite seem like they were taking that one quite as seriously as they could have in that regard. But yeah, those would be my suggestions with respect to that. Just thinking off the top of my head here, I'd have to dig into that question a little deeper, to be honest with you, Stu. But that's a good question, even though you asked it way back in February. That's a good question to still answer now and to still think about now, to be honest with you. And maybe some of these projects are further in development now, 6 months since you wrote it. We'll have to talk about that. But either way, thank you for the email, Stu. Glad that we finally were able to get caught up on it. So next up is Alex De Silva, and I feel bad about this one because, I feel bad about how long it's been since we've done a flight chat in a while for everybody, but definitely in Alex's case because he was in the middle of a watch through of Star Trek TNG and kind of interrupted that a little bit as far as his reports. So this last email that he sent on Friday, March 6th, he'll mention it at the end, but there's a decent amount of time release stuff that you talked about here. Like he starts off talking about the fact that Major League Soccer and Formula One are both included with Apple TV. Yes, that is true. He says you used to have to pay to extra to watch both, but now they're available on the streaming service at no extra cost. He says it's pretty cool because he can now finally follow his local soccer team, the New England Revolution. They're pretty awful compared to the rest of the league, he says, but hey, I'm loyal to all my Boston New England teams. Yes, he is. We've talked about that before. But he says it's going to be a lot of fun keeping up with the F1 season. First race is actually, it was Sunday that week in Australia at the time of him writing the email. Says there's a whole bunch of new rules and regulations that were introduced to the sport this year, so it's going to be a completely new experience for everyone. Serves as a great jumping on point for newbies to the sport. Have you ever followed F1 before? And does the fact that you can now watch it live on Apple TV for free make you interested in keeping up with it? As for MLS, it doesn't look like there's a local Detroit team, unfortunately. I'm not against F1, like watching it, but as I've said, there's too much shit to watch. And, even if I had read this 6 months ago when you sent it, or 5 months ago when you sent it, I don't know that I would have jumped headfirst into F1 at the time because there's just so much else to get caught up on. I mentioned all the Apple TV Plus shows I haven't watched yet, and then you throw in F1, it's like, okay. I wouldn't mind it, though. It wouldn't be something that I'm against getting into. I could probably see myself getting into that sooner than I could NASCAR or anything like that. So there is that. He also has a paragraph here about being 3 months away from the World Cup, which is now over. Who won that? Spain? Spain won that, didn't they? I think they did, if I'm not mistaken. Over 500 million ticket requests, while only 7 million seats actually available across the whole tournament. People from all over the world trying to get in to see their teams fight for the world title. They did. They had tons of host cities. That was a crazy month for sure when all that went down. Hopefully you enjoyed it, Alex. Maybe on the next email, if we get back into the swing of things, you can let us know how you felt about it. But the last TNG episode that he watched before we went on our little break here was Unification, the two-parter, Unification Part 1 and 2. He says Part 1 was definitely a slower setup kind of episode. After McCoy in the series premiere, I was surprised that it took until Season 5 for another original series cast member to appear, but that just goes to show TNG stands on its own and doesn't need to rely on nostalgia. Very true. Very true, and I think that's a big reason why TNG established its own identity, because it really wasn't hanging on or riding the coattails of the original series cast or stories at all, truthfully. He says, I liked seeing Picard and Data all Vulcanized. That's not something I necessarily ever expected to see, but they fit right into the populace of Romulus. I guess you could say they were technically Romulanized, because the idea is they were trying to pose as Romulans, even though, yes, it's the same thing with the pointed ears, definitely. I totally get what you're saying. And yeah, that part is cool to see how the makeup of the eyebrows and also the ears fit on both Sir Patrick Stewart, and Brent Spiner in that regard, costumed. He says it felt kind of surreal to see Spock again in part two. It's been so long since I've seen him in the original and animated series, as well as the first 6 movies. Spock being there actually interacting with Picard and Data felt like a full circle moment and a reminder that while the shows may be quite different from each other, they're all still Star Trek. Yes, definitely. In fact, I love that moment. That is one of my favorite moments, like in the franchise, is Spock and Data and their byplay. I am really glad that they chose to write a scene for both those characters because Data is very much the TNG Spock, absolutely, and he's just an android without emotions as opposed to a Vulcan that is suppressing emotions. But very similar like machinations in terms of how the characters, the roles that they play on their respective enterprises and what they do makes all the sense in the world for them to have that conversation. It's a great conversation. I love that scene. Really, it is a full circle moment. I agree. It really is awesome. And even the Picard interactions as well are great. True. He says, whenever I watch Star Trek, I try to purposely avoid the guest star credits at the start of the episode. When I saw Denise Crosby's name at the start of this one, I thought, oh man, I wish I didn't know that was coming now. But it ended up being okay because after the opening, I kind of forgot that she was going to show up until she actually appeared again. Yeah, and she's not in the first part. She's only in part 2, Unification 2. So, yeah, but that's, and you'd seen her character already in Redemption, when they finally revealed what Commander Sela looked like. So, there is that. He says it's funny that this two-parter almost served as a massive geopolitical shift, or would it be more accurate to say stellar political shift in the Star Trek status quo? Reunification between Romulus and Vulcan would surely have been a noteworthy event. Next episode is called A Matter of Time, Live Long and Prosper, Alex. I will say this, Alex, there's 2 things. One, I did want to point out that Captain Kavada, the Klingon captain of the ship that Picard and Data were on to get into Romulan territory, that's Stephen Root, otherwise known as Milton from Office Space, and he's been a character actor in many other different things. Yeah, that's him. Crazy, huh? Red Stapler guy? That's him. Just wanted to throw that out there because I don't feel like a lot of people know that. The other thing I will say, with respect to that last part that you said about it almost served as a massive geopolitical shift, or stellar political shift, you said. I will tell you that depending on how much further you decide to go into the franchise, Alex, there may or may not be a storyline that actually is a part 3 to this episode. There may actually be a Unification part 3 somewhere in the annals of this particular franchise. It might have been something that aired within the last 9 years. I will put it that way. We've had a number of Star Trek series on Paramount Plus, formerly CBS All Access. There might be a part 3 that actually does show you what actually happened, when that might have occurred, potentially. That is all I will say with respect to that. And it will depend again on how far you decide to go into the franchise. Hopefully considerably further than the TNG and TOS ranks and whatnot that you've gone through so far. But either way, thank you as always for the emails, Alex. Hopefully we can get back on track and hear the rest of your watch updates. I don't know if you paused or if you kept going or how far you've gone, but either way, it'd be great to get an update. So here's hoping. All right, this next catch-up email sent on April 7th from Omari Daniels is a Super Mario Galaxy movie review. So let's dive into that real quick here. He titled it, Sorry Critics, but your Mario movie is in another galaxy. Yes, because the critics, for whatever reason, have not liked either of the Illumination Mario films. Doesn't matter, they've both made $1 billion and the audience enjoys them all. So get ready for that third one, because it's going to happen, and I can't wait. But Omari said that he had a blast when he saw the Super Mario Galaxy movie in the theater. He says, I was one of the few people who didn't have a kid accompanying them, but the kid inside me was overjoyed. Yes, that's definitely how I felt. I will agree that this film lacks some of the first movie's slower moments, like Mario and Luigi in Brooklyn or Bowser and Kamek playing the piano. The first movie laid the groundwork of establishing the world, and now the sequel can just hit the ground running. Could it have used some slower moments? Yes, especially as a big fan of Rosalina. I wish that we got more of her in the Lumas. But I don't think the pacing or story were as bad as critics make them out to be. I would agree. He says, in a way, I view the Mario Galaxy movie in a similar way to how I view the Sonic 2 movie. I think Sonic 2 is a better video game movie than the first. but I find the first movie has better pacing and slower moments, with Sonic getting used to being on Earth. The same can be said here, but that's not to say that this movie lacks slower moments. Bowser got way more to do than I expected, and I appreciated the moments between him, Mario, and Luigi. I have not seen Sonic 2, so I gotta take your word on that. Mario, I haven't seen any of the Sonic movies. I still have not. Hopefully that's another bridge that I can cross in the not too distant future here. But again, of course, there's too much shit to watch. But either way, he says, for me, Mario Galaxy was like watching a live run of Super Mario Maker. It starts off nice and easy, but then the creator starts throwing a few obstacles and curveballs your way. A chomp here, a wall of thwomps there, maybe an unexpected poison mushroom, and all culminating with a Bowser battle over a bridge. That's how I saw Mario Galaxy, he says. Plus, it will always have my respect for bringing back the red star from the first Galaxy game. That power-up is what I think the wing cap in Mario 64 should have been, a power-up that lets you fly instead of glide and slowly descend. Oh, I will agree with that. We should have been able to fly instead of glide and slowly descend, because they time stamped it. It lasted like, what, 15 seconds in Mario 64? If that, yeah, no, I agree. We needed the flight ability for sure. He says, I never thought I'd see it again when it didn't show up in Galaxy 2, so I'm very grateful for it showing up in this movie. More importantly, as a die-hard Star Fox fan, okay, here we go, he says, I am excited to see his possible big screen adventure. I didn't expect this film to give us as much Fox McCloud as it did, and he felt like a supporting character in the same way that Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield did in No Way Home instead of a cameo. In addition, I'm glad that he didn't overshadow the Mario characters and wasn't heavily involved in the final battle. He was there to give us a taste of his story and be the ace pilot that we've known him as. It's the most attention that Star Fox has gotten, maybe since Star Fox Zero came out on the Wii U, and I hope this translates to Nintendo giving us a new Star Fox game. We're at the point where franchises like Star Fox and F-Zero are known more for their association with Super Smash Bros., and that's unfortunate. At least Metroid has gotten a few new games as of recent. Oh, Stu, if you're still listening, Metroid. That's another one for adaptation. Metroid. We need to see a real, like a sci-fi, hard sci-fi Metroid movie. Yes, definitely. And one of these days I'll screw up my courage and play that damn video game, because I tried when I was a kid and the Metroid scared me. But whatever. But yes, Metroid. Just briefly for Stu. Back to Omari, he says, but the sky is literally the limit with this world. Maybe we don't get a Super Smash Bros. Movie, and that's okay. There's room for a Star Fox movie, and there's plenty of spin-off from the potential from the Mario movie alone. Bring on the Donkey Kong Country movie or Luigi's Mansion movie. Kids and adults would line up in droves to see Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong go on an adventure, or to see Luigi explore a haunted mansion. I ramble enough, and there's a lot more that I could say, but glad that you enjoyed the film and looking forward to your future reviews. Keep on jumping up, Superstar. Omari, thank you for that email way back when on April 7th. I agree with you that those movies would essentially be printing money, because it was clear to me watching Mario Galaxy in theaters earlier this year that, with all the kids that were there, right, they were pointing out the references. Like, they knew who the Game & Watch boy was. Like, they knew all the stuff from the video game. So they've been seeing this. They've been playing this, the old school stuff and the newer stuff on the Switch. They are initiated into the Mario and Nintendo world, so these are not references that are going to go over their heads. The sky's the limit. You can go forward with the future of Mario movies and with spin-offs. The Star Fox stuff blew me away. I was utterly stunned that he was in the movie at all, and that he got the amount of attention that he got. I agree, as a supporting character, not just as a throwaway, if you will. It was more than a cameo in that regard, and I think they certainly could expound upon that, and I hope they do. I really hope they do, for sure. Because, yeah, it doesn't need to be Super Smash Brothers, but it can be all these others as well. They could do Smash Brothers too, right? They most certainly could. But either way, yeah, thoroughly enjoyed that movie. It's been a great year in the theaters, and it's hard to believe that movie came out way back in April. We're talking months ago. It's crazy what's come out since. So, but thank you for that review, Omari. Let's get back in the swing of things and hopefully see another email from you soon, good sir. So next up, we have 4 emails from Mr. Jared Kardos, and they go all the way back to February, and they also go up to July 31st. So we've got some way back, some in between, and then a bit more current. So let's start with the first one that he sent way back in February 20th, called A lot of Star Trek with a sprinkle of wars. Ooh, I like that title. He says, before I get into recent episodes, I want to bring up some news that's happened over the week. One you might know, one that I'm sure you know, and both of them related to stars. This, of course, is going all the way back to February 20th. He said that they announced, as part of the 60th anniversary celebrations for Star Trek, IDW, who has the rights to Star Trek, announced 2 new books. The first, simply titled Star Trek, is a post-Picard series about Captain 7 of 9 of the Enterprise G on a classified mission that sends them beyond the reaches of explored space. As one of the many people who was rooting for that Star Trek Legacy series to spin off from Picard, getting a comic about that crew is good to see. I agree. That is good to see. The creative team sounds good too, he says. I wasn't familiar with artist Dennis Main here before this announcement, but looking at his art, it looks amazing, very stylized and expressive. But from the cover we get, it looks like he can do that and have 7 look like 7. And the writer, Christopher Cantwell, is probably most famous for his TV show Halt and Catch Fire. Oh, AMC, all right. What's his name? I cannot remember his name. Who is... let me Google this real quick. Just so that Ian... No, I was about to... Hang on. I'm just going to look at Lee Pace. I don't know why I keep wanting to think that Lee Pace's name is Ian, but no. Lee Pace. He was in that show, yes. He says that Cantwell, the writer of Halt and Catch Fire, he's done quite a few comics. Some of them I have read, he says, like runs on Iron Man and the miniseries The United States of Captain America. Most of them pretty good, but the one that's most pertinent is Star Trek Defiant, the spin-off series to IDW's previous Star Trek series that was about Worf running a more Shadow Ops ship with characters like Ambassador Spock, B'Elanna Torres, Ensign Ro, and Lore. Oh, wow. Okay. There's a lineup. I haven't finished Defiant or the main book it was spun off of. I believe I told you about that one before, which is about Cisco coming back on a mission to stop the deaths of gods throughout the galaxy. But what I have read was really good, and it's cool to see him get on the main book. Yeah, my radar is up for this one. He says, I say main book because there is a spinoff of it coming out of it called Star Trek Zero Point, which will be about Captain Raffi Musiker taking command of a starship after the disappearance of the Enterprise, using a mysterious AI program to try and stop disasters before they happen. No word on the artist yet, but it's being written by Charlie Jane Anders, who I mostly know from writing some New Mutants comics for Marvel, but is also an acclaimed novelist whose books have been on my hilariously long list of regular books to read, and it all sounds very promising. There has been a lot of great Star Trek comics in the past few years, and it sounds like these will continue to keep that streak alive. Yeah, and I need to read them. I do. I need to read them all, Jared. There's too much shit to watch. There's too much shit to read, but I need to read those. So thank you for letting me know about that. I wonder how further in development all those are. Maybe you'll update that in your next couple of emails here, because your next paragraph here was about the second trailer for Mandalorian and Grogu, which you said continued to look like a fun Star Wars romp. Said you were looking forward to Zeb playing a role. You like how Din is trying to impart on Grogu as much as he can. But yeah, that movie's we've all had our thoughts and whatnot on that particular film. So let's move on to your flight chat thoughts. He said the talk about the Discord age verification was pretty disappointing because I don't trust Discord enough to give them my driver's license. Yeah, I don't know what we were talking about, like the whole Discord thing, because they were talking about age verification and how that was going to change stuff and whatnot. I don't know what's going on with Discord with respect to that, truthfully. He said it does seem like they're walking back a lot of this push after the almost cacophonic outcry against it. I like that, cacophonic. He says, as for my email, his last email he sent before this one, I forgot to finish my thought during this talk about Silent Hill Downpour. I did mean that there was an Xbox port about a year after Silent Hill 2 Remake came out, and I wouldn't be surprised if the same thing happened with Townfall. But we'll have to wait and see. I have to look over my emails a little more closely before hitting send. Okay. He was doing a Discovery Watch update. Oh my goodness. All right. So let's see. He watched 4 episodes of Star Trek Discovery. Magic to make the sanest man go mad, in which Discovery does a Groundhog Day. Yep. He says, man, if I got going on this a little earlier, I could have watched this on Groundhog Day. Alas, anyway, this was also the return of Rainn Wilson as Mudd, which I assumed would happen, since I likely wouldn't get an actor that big for only 1 episode, but I was surprised it happened that fast. Also just surprised at just how bloodthirsty he was. It's been ages since I watched the original series, But I remember Mudd being mostly a swindler and a con artist, and I don't think I would have pictured that guy murdering a guy over and over in sadistic glee. I guess that's part of that updating for modern times thing you've talked about, but I don't think it was that necessary. Um, I will say that even though Rainn Wilson's version of Mudd is very different from Roger C. Carmel's version, I get why they made him that way. Because Mudd in the original story is not openly sadistic, but there are definitely things that he does and says in Mudd's Women and I Mudd that make him extremely callous to the plight of anyone else, especially those aboard the Enterprise. So yeah, I could see a modernized version being darker in the mindset that Rainn Wilson is in. I'll say that, and it worked for the episode. I was fine with it. I think Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad is not only a great title, but I think it was a very good episode. He said it was a solid episode outside of that. He said, I was surprised at some of the ways that it bumped up against expectations. I assumed, being the lead, Micah would be the one who figured out the loop was going on, but I was pleasantly surprised it was Stamets who was the one that figured it out. I liked how they used the loops to see how those characters react when they're outside of their comfort zones. Would Michael have actually really gotten that close to Ash without this? Maybe eventually, but definitely not that soon. I also liked how the crew weaponized Mudd's greed and ego to win the day, even if Mudd did kind of get what he really wanted by the end. Yeah, it was a great ensemble episode. I agree with that. Then there was Si Vis Pacem Parabellum. He said felt a bit like a transitional episode. Some good stuff there, like the hows and whys Saru became possessed, and I was trying to suss out if L'Rell was being genuine to Katrina, but I felt like it was there to set up for the big confrontation with the Klingons. Perhaps. I'd have to rewatch that one to really remember that. Which we got in spades, he says. Into the Forest I Go. This episode, he said, had the feel of a season finale, which is crazy for being about 2/3 of the way through. Michael's confrontation with the Klingons in the ship was really satisfying after how things went at the Battle of the Binary Stars. The way that they used the Discovery Spore Drive, and by extension Stamets, was suspenseful, though I was confident that nothing bad was going to happen to him. I mean, they wouldn't just randomly kill off a fairly major member of the cast, right? Heh. And Ash's reaction on the ship definitely seemed like it could have been PTSD, were it not for the last episode I watched this week, Despite Yourself. He said after one last spore jump, the Discovery finds themselves not just in an alternate universe, but the alternate universe, the mirror universe. Yes, indeed. The halfway point of the first season. Now, I remember asking, he said, before about how Michelle Yeoh was going to show up in that Section 31 movie, so I knew we were going to get there eventually. It made sense. Most shows in the series does. And what we got in the Mirrorverse versions of characters and how they interact with our crew was really interesting. And sometimes fun in spots, like Captain Tilly, and not so fun ways, like Lorca in that torture chamber. Oh, the agony booth. Yes, that's in the original series, by the way, Jared. The agony booth. Oh, yeah. That's in the Mirror episode. That's taken straight from that episode. As Spock put it, a most effective means of discipline. Yeah. It's way worse, obviously, in this episode of Discovery. He says, however, what I was not expecting was Ash turning out to be a Klingon in disguise and him snapping the Doctor's neck. I don't remember the last time I said, holy shit, it's some Star Trek material, but I definitely did here. And he's still helping on the mission like nothing's going on and making out with Michael. This is going to be messy, and I'm here for it. I wonder if he updated on his further emails, even with our flight chat break. Wonder if he emailed his progress with respect to his Discovery Watch. Let's find out here shortly. Let's dig into his second email. So that one he sent on February 20th. This next one that he sent was on March 14th, which this one, the title suggests it might be outdated. It's called The Merger in the Trailer. He said, since you're going with shorter episodes, I'll also try to be just a twinge more concise. So let's go, starting with the whole love triangle between Netflix and Paramount over winning the affection of Warner Brothers, the affection and expensive IP library of Warner Brothers. I've been on position of I hope both teams lose, but it looks like Paramount is going to sweep Warner Brothers off his feet if the regulators approve it. Definitely. All the rest of this, he agrees that this isn't going to turn WB and most importantly the DC properties into MAGA puppets, but outside of union worries, layouts, and other fun aspects of major acquisitions, one worry I've seen is the combination of Paramount's frequent acquisition of Skydance and Warner Brothers Discovery's existing debt could put Paramount on shaky fiscal ground. Unless they see crazy good profits, Paramount could eventually be acquired or face the chopping block, further reducing the number of major studios. But that's all conjecture, possible problems for now. I'm just hoping that if the deal goes through, everything in regards to DC Studios stays where it was before. If, when they do eventually move everything into one super app, they use the HBO Max version and put the Paramount Plus stuff there, because the Paramount Plus app kind of sucks. It's a terrible UI. They should really adapt the UI for Pluto. That is still true. But now, Jared, we got to wait and see what the lawyers say. Which, again, we'll see if you mention that in your other emails after this. But the Lanterns trailer, that's what you were really talking about in this particular episode. He said the trailer looked really good. As you said, we knew what kind of show this is going to be. But I was initially surprised, he said, by just how hostile Hal and John are, especially since they've been more cordial in recent years. But between that dynamic and the more Earth-focused, rural and gritty feel, I realized what they were doing. This is basically a modern take on the hard-traveling heroes era of Green Lantern, when Hal teamed up with Green Arrow to try and find the soul of America. That's a very intriguing place to start with these characters. It's also fitting, because while Hal and Ollie are the stars of that book, it was also where John Stewart first debuted, and that's probably what they're thinking of in that regard. He says, by the way, I recently reread the Hard Traveling Heroes era, and if you're looking for something to read before the show comes out, I recommend trying the initial 11-ish issues by Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams. Denny O'Neil, ooh, okay. I like Denny O'Neil. It definitely feels like something from the late 70s, he says. But it's also surprisingly prescient, dealing with many real themes like poverty, racism, environmentalism, and drugs in ways that still hold up. Or if you just want to see the issue where John debuts, you could check out Green Lantern, Green Arrow, 87. Everything that you just said there, Jared, is probably also why they're adapting it for this Lantern series. Because it is prescient, it is relevant, it is dealing with things and issues that we're still dealing with today. And probably would do extremely well on an HBO series, for sure. He says, as for the rest of the trailer, while Kyle Chandler gives Hal a bit of a southern twang I wasn't really expecting, as soon as he was eyeing the one sheriff, saying that he likes the way that she hates his guts and talking about how he has had stupider plans, I thought, yeah, that's Hal, alright. As for the small bit of the costume we see, I don't know if we can fully judge until we see it on Hal, which we have. But I think it works, especially for this take on an older, weathered, more tired Hal Jordan. It sort of reminds me of Batman and Wonder Woman's armors in the DCEU, where you can see the wear and tear of decades, and in Diana's case, centuries of battle. Plus, I wouldn't be surprised if when John eventually gets the ring, his suit will look more shiny and new, if not have a different look entirely. And speaking of John, he looks great as well. Like I said, his dynamic with Hal feels more antagonistic than usual, but I think it works for the kind of story they're telling, and it's going to make it even better when these two do eventually find common ground. He doesn't have any Discovery updates at that point. He didn't want to go on the app for a bit because of the whole Paramount WB merger thing being announced. He had a similar thing happen when Netflix almost had it, and then he got caught up on some other shows, but he says he'll probably get back into it by next time. Alright, so that was on March 14th. So his next email after that was sent on March 20th, just a week later. So probably not any updates there, but this one was called You Can't Take the Flight From Me and brand new trailers. Alright, so still in March. Let's see, he was talking about the Firefly relaunch. That's right, that did get announced back then. He says, I've been a fan since I first saw some of the few episodes Fox aired, and over the years I've picked up different versions of the TV show and movies. I would also occasionally check out some of the novels and comics that expanded on the world, but I never really expected anything new with the cast, so the news that there was a pilot for an animated series in development was surprising but also exciting, he says. While I agree that the show has definite flaws, I can see now that I'm older and hopefully at least a little wiser, such as the lack of Asian representation, despite all the imagery and language used, and the twinge of Confederate imagery. I feel like the show has the opportunity to fix some of that while delivering more of what was really beloved about the series and movie. Agreed. Completely agree with both of those, because yes, in retrospect, having all of your white characters and even your black characters speaking Chinese and not really seeing any Chinese, any Asian representation whatsoever in the show, demerit, definitely. And yes, the Confederates, the Confederate like coding of certain things with the brown coats and whatnot, yeah, also red flag. But yes, they do have an opportunity. Mark Guggenheim absolutely has an opportunity to fix that and modernize it. Hopefully he does. Jared says, my only concern is that I wish it wasn't taking place between the show and the movie. I understand this allows certain actors to return when they otherwise couldn't. I don't know why I'm being spoiler averse for a 20-plus-year-old movie, but here we are. I think that could work if it's meant to be a miniseries, but if they're reaching for multiple seasons, I hope they go past the movie, because I don't know how many stories they can fit into that brief time period, and I think seeing where the crew goes next would be even more exciting. But even so, I'll definitely be checking it out when it comes out. The if is definitely a concern, especially since I believe Disney Hulu canceled a Buffy revival, but I'm hopeful. Yeah, I hear you. If it's going to be constricted to that time frame, especially knowing that, it was only 8 months, I think, in between the show and the movie, something to that effect, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I would be curious to see where they're going on with that, but obviously it's because of Wash, right? It's without being spoiler averse, because we talk spoilers on Flight Chat, Jared. It's because of Wash. They wanted a reason to bring Wash back, and you can't if he's dead, like he is in Serenity. So yeah, they had to bring him back. That is because you're not doing it without Alan Tudyk. You have to bring Alan Tudyk back. You can't bring back Fillion and Sean Mayer and Gina Torres and Kate. You can't bring everybody else back and not bring back Alan Tudyk. You have to bring back Alan Tudyk. So yeah, I get it. If there was some way that they could somehow bring Wash back after the movie, sure, but there's some pesky things with that. Obviously, when they did the movie, it was Joss Whedon like slamming the door shut on anything further, right? So this is how they have to be able to do it beforehand, and I get it, but yeah, it's weird, and who knows like how short it'll be or how it'll go, but yeah, either way, be something intriguing to look at. I don't know if there have been any other developments on that since this time. I haven't heard anything, so hopefully it's still going, to be honest with you. He said there was also some great trailers that came out. Dune Part 3, which looks incredible, to the surprise of no one who'd seen the previous movies. Stunning visuals, with the music gives it this feeling of awestruck dread. He says what's exciting for him is that unlike the other two movies, I have no real idea of what's going on in this trailer, since my exposure to Dune prior to this was the David Lynch movie, and I've never read Dune Messiah, which this movie is based on. I do want to try and read through the first book and Messiah before this one comes out, though such projects don't go as well for me either. But even if I don't make it, I'll be happy to watch it blind when it comes out in December. I'm in the same boat with respect to that, and God knows if I'll ever get to be able to read Messiah before again, even though I've read the first Dune book. But we'll see. Oh, and then this whole entire last paragraph is his thoughts on the Spider-Man Brand New Day trailer, which he called amazing. Yeah, this whole paragraph really feels like it's outdated, Jared. I think we should just skip forward. Other than the fact that you said you were very excited to see this in July, so there is that. But yeah, we're so far past any of this with respect to speculation or whatnot. We have all these answers. We've just recently seen it, and I don't think that this particular email, although this last email that you sent, Jared, is dated July 31st. Are there any thoughts on Brand New Day? Did you see it early? No. This is all that SDCC news is the title of the email. So this is Jared's last email that he sent on July 31st, all San Diego Comic-Con related. All right. So he said, I wanted to shout out some news that wasn't mentioned first before getting into topics discussed on the show, starting with the event's namesake, the comics. He says, you mentioned that in terms of movie TV news, Marvel had a bigger showing compared to DC. While I can definitely see that, ironically, the opposite was true for comic news. There's a lot I could mention, he says, but the biggest news from DC was probably the announcement of a big one-shot for Batman Day in September called Batman of Two Worlds. Oh, what's this? It will star both the mainline and absolute Batman, written by their current main writers, Matt Fraction and Scott Snyder. It's not a team-up, but rather two stories featuring a similar villain crime, and we'll see how each Batman approaches it. Absolute Batman is almost as huge as the man himself, being one of the biggest books in comics, and already has an animated series in the works. So it's cool not only to get more content, but also a story that will hopefully lead its new readers to try out the regular Batman book, which is also really good right now, and the mainline universe. Okay. He says another surprising thing that came out of the con was a trailer for a new series in the Avatar franchise, not the Blue People, called Avatar 7 Havens, which looks like a stark departure, going from the first series' Asian-influenced fantasy and the second's turn-of-the-century steampunk straight into a futuristic post-apocalyptic world with the fate of the world resting in the hands of the newest Avatar, a young woman who is hated and hunted because the world believes the last Avatar is responsible for the world's current state. The style and story managed to feel like a radical departure, but also to keep the roots, keep to the roots rather, which is exciting. Avatar is actually having a bit of resurgence right now, he says, because that weekend, a couple weeks ago, they also released an all-new animated movie, a sequel to the original series called Avatar Aang, The Last Airbender, which might be one of my favorite movies to come out this year. It's an excellent continuation of the original series, with some of the best animation I've seen in a while. The fact that it was originally slated to come out in theaters and was put as a Paramount Plus exclusive instead is a massive shame, because it would have looked great on the screen and I think been pretty successful if given a good slot. Well, that does sound unfortunate. I think you probably might have been onto something. It would have been interesting for fans to see that on the big screen, depending on what the studio situation is with respect to that. I'm sure that's what affected its ability, their impetus to release it theatrically or not. He says, while there was a lot more, and that all of that, of course, beforehand was him showing that DC had a bigger showing comic-wise than Marvel did at San Diego Comic-Con, which that's cool. Thank you for that. He says, while there was a lot more, the last bit of news I'll throw in here was a new trailer for Marvel's Wolverine, which continues to look really good. Insomniac seems to have taken what works in their previous Spider-Man games while also making it fit with Logan's bloody style. Recently, some people complain because it's heavily implied there's a romantic subplot between Logan and Jean Grey, and they're afraid it will be a continuation of what we saw in the 2000s movies. But this is also a world where the X-Men have yet to exist, so I'm going to reserve judgment on how it works until I finish the story. Either way, it looks like it's going to be a fun game. Alright, thank you for that. Now for the news you talked about in the episode, starting with Lanterns, which had a really great trailer. It continues to look like a really compelling dealing with themes of mentorship, what we teach to those next in line, and the world we leave them, all the while further proving the naysayers wrong by showing plenty of cosmic and plenty of green. Yeah, you got that right. What they're doing with the Manhunters and people connecting them with the Martian Manhunter is very curious. On one hand, the robot Manhunters have never been shapeshifters, and that X-Cross around what we think might be one in the trailer looks close to Jean's costume. That's what I have been saying, Jared. But he says, on the other hand, that would be an odd way to introduce Jean. Now that I'm thinking about it, one of the Manhunter's biggest stories was probably the 1988 event Millennium, which involves them using a mix of human-like robotic agents and mind-controlling certain people to infiltrate the superhero community. So maybe they're adapting that, and changing them to shapeshifters is cleaner and less confusing? I guess we'll find out pretty soon, yeah. I would say, between the two, my guess is still probably going to be something closer to Jon Jones and Martian Manhunter. But your idea is not off the table until we see it. We are, 2 weeks away? Actually, less than that. We are 1 week away. That's right, we're 1 week away from the release of Lanterns. So we will start to see and unwrap that puzzle soon. He says, and speaking of Lanterns, you also showed dismay that you weren't there to get the rings people were getting at San Diego Comic-Con, and I have good news and bad news. The good news is the DC shop actually had the rings for sale at a surprisingly low price. The bad news is they're already sold out. But there is a notify when back in stock button, so hopefully that means they'll do another wave at some point. Okay, now, here's the thing, Jared. Earlier today, I actually went and looked to see if they had those rings. I was looking for Green Lantern rings in general, because I think I want one for when I do Flight Box reviews of the show, and saw that DC Shop was selling this ring. It's available for pre-order, so even though you can't get it immediately, it's available to ship. The thing is, you won't get it until October 30th. Estimated delivery, they'll ship on October 30th. Estimated delivery November 1st, November 5th. So they're essentially on back order, but they're $70. And while I might still want one, I wouldn't call that a surprisingly low price. Not for a ring like that, truthfully. I think 70 is a bit up there. I mean, maybe I'm not all that up on like how this merchandise sells. I know there are people on eBay selling these for like $100. I've seen one that had an auction. I think opening bid was at 50, but like the buy it now price is 100, something like that, for this exact ring. Part of me is really thinking about pre-ordering this one. Obviously, I wouldn't get it in time for the show, but yeah, 70, I don't know, just seems a little high. Maybe I'm off on that. I don't know, but No, it is available for pre-order, though, I will say that. But thank you for that indicator. He said, regarding the Marvel panel, you wondered if the costume Deadpool wore is a reference to something in the comics, and yes, it is, but also something else, he says. The color scheme is very similar to Wade's outfit in the series Uncanny X-Force, where he's a member and is surprisingly more serious and moral, though he still has some good lines here and there. But the other part of it is that it was apparently an all-denim suit, which sounds horrendously uncomfortable, and the color of the gray part of his costume is listed as Jean Grey. His comedy had layers that night. Yes, I've heard that. And I've heard that was definitely a thing. It was kind of a de facto, like, spoiler tease and whatnot. But, yeah, intriguing. And yes, it does sound horrendously uncomfortable, because there's no way that stretches, unless it's like the stretchy denim that you get at, like, Kohl's and stuff like that. I don't know. But, all right. I can always count on Jared for the good comic lore contributions. Thank you indeed for that. He sent a picture along too. This definitely looks darker than the one that Ryan Reynolds wore, like, and way more serious. Wow, this is the most serious Daredevil I've seen, or not Daredevil, my goodness, Deadpool that I've seen. All right. He says, as for the Ghost Rider news, that was unexpected, but a cool surprise. He says, Gosling's a great actor, and while I don't know if I would have immediately thought of him for Johnny Blaze, despite all the fan casting done around him, I bet he'll do a good job. It's also funny because I found out from this that Gosling is married to Eva Mendes, who was the romantic lead in the first Ghost Rider movie with Nick Cage. Also, the memes that came out of Gosling and Simu Liu doing their face-off in Barbie, but as their Marvel characters, have been pretty funny. I knew that he was married to Eva Mendes, but forgot. Also forgot that she was in the first Ghost Rider movie. So yes, that is kind of funny. Which, that's not a terrible movie. The first Ghost Rider, I haven't seen Spirit of Vengeance. The first one, not a terrible movie. We reviewed that. It was one of our last reviews we did over at Squadcast Media for that Patreon. It wasn't bad. It had some redeeming qualities to it. It did. He says, finally, the formal announcement of Black Panther 3 with David Johnson as the new T'Challa was really cool to hear. So far, I believe I've only seen him in Alien Romulus, but he was absolutely fantastic in that role. Without getting into details, that movie showcased his vast range as an actor. That said, it was surprising to see them go this route, since I figured Shuri would continue as the Black Panther for a bit longer. I'm curious to see where her role will be and how the mantle will be passed. Also, while we are calling him the new T'Challa, he isn't the same man, and I'm curious to see how his background as an outsider will affect his story. I have to imagine there will be some parallels to Killmonger, and it'll be interesting to see how they compare and contrast. I think that'll do for me on this one, though I'll probably be writing in again soon to talk about Spider-Man Brand New Day. Thanks for reading, and looking forward to your future episodes. Well, I am definitely looking forward to your thoughts on Brand New Day, Jared. I will say that with respect to what you're talking about with Black Panther 3, I'm actually not surprised that they've decided to go with younger T'Challa taking up the mantle now, because I only think they ever intended for the mourning of Chadwick Boseman to only be one film, and I don't think they had any extended. I don't think they changed their plans for Shuri to be the Black Panther for an extended period of time. I think they always wanted to get back to a T'Challa type story, if you will. Nothing against Shuri, nothing against Letitia Wright, but they did want to get back to closer to their original plan, I think, which obviously they've changed it, for obvious reasons. They had to change it, but I think this does get them back potentially closer to their original ideas on what they wanted to do with the character, what Coogler wanted to do with the character going forward. And yeah, it's going to be different, obviously, because he is T'Challa's son. He is Prince T'Challa, son of King T'Challa. So, this is all part of the MCU, all part of the MCU's continuity and what they're doing, and this is just another variant that they are putting out, and we'll see how it goes. But I'm excited for it. I'm very intrigued by it, and again, everybody that told me we weren't going to have a male T'Challa ever again, pay up. Anybody that bet me, pay up, because I ended up winning that one. I don't care what technicalities there are, it's happening, and I can't wait for it to happen. So let's look forward to that. But yeah, definitely send in your thoughts on Brand New Day, Jared. Would love to hear that. Thank you, as always, for the feedback, good sir. I'm glad to get back on track. So now let's get to some super new feedback from the most recent episode of FliteCast. This is a text that was sent by my old podcast co-host, Brent. from Fans Without Borders and also DC TV Squadcast, back from our Squadcast Media days. He listened to the most recent episode of the FliteCast, and he had a question with respect to James Gunn and his contract with DC. He's asking, James Gunn's contract with DC is currently set to expire in spring of 2027. Do you think he will re-sign for an extension? Does your answer change if Man of Tomorrow is a box office hit, or if it's a flop, or if it's neither of those, but rather just turns a modest profit? Basically, what do you think are the chances we get to continue to enjoy Gunn's work on DC after Man of Tomorrow? Well, I do think that Man of Tomorrow, Brent, plays a huge part in it, because I think that that's the big project, right? You know, regardless of what anybody says about Supergirl or Clayface or Lanterns, Man of Tomorrow is the big one, right? And I think that because Gunn and Safran have positioned the project as not simply being a sequel to Superman, talking about it being like part of the Superman saga, we know that they're involving other characters. We know Supergirl is going to be in it. We know Brainiac. We know other Lanterns will be in it, right? So the idea is that this is going to be like the first kind of real big team up. I mean, Superman itself certainly had team up aspects, team up elements, you know, with the Justice Gang being involved, you know, and, you know, that little tease of Kara at the end, but we're going to see more of Kara, you would think, in this particular film. And then the whole deal with Lex and the battle suit. So Man of Tomorrow is, I think, the big project that the DCU is hinging a lot of their bets on, right? And I do think that, you know, it's an interesting scenario that DC Studios is in, because I can completely understand why being in operational flux as far as ownership would delay any contract extensions at this point. I think that they are going along with the plan that Gunn and Safran have for DC Studios, because that plan was already established. I don't know how quick they are to greenlight more things, though, truthfully, right? Like, they're kind of treating DC Studios like, okay, this is our prized possession. This is our biggest potential cash cow, if you will. And look, people, I'm not saying you're like this, Brent, because I know you think otherwise. You know, you definitely have a more rational brain when it comes to this. But people have been hinging all of their thoughts and perspectives on this straight to just box office only. And, you know, because Supergirl was such a box office bomb, well, that's it. It's over. You know, now James Gunn is on thin ice. The seat is red hot. No, because smart people, more rational individuals, realize the HBO Max potential, realize the streaming potential. And, you know, David Zaslav said that he didn't want to make movies specifically for streaming, but that doesn't mean he's going to discount streaming as a secondary market for theatrically released movies that don't necessarily do as well, or even for ones that do well in that regard. So they're watching what Supergirl's doing in VOD. They're going to watch what she does as far as their numbers on HBO Max in the next month or so, right? They're paying attention to that. And so there is at least a bit of a long game being played there. They're certainly acting differently than the previous regimes did 10 years ago. You know, there is no trying to pull the rug out from under Gunn and Safran and say, okay, well, you've got to change course. You've got to make a Wonder Woman movie. You've got to make a Batman movie. You've got to start doing things the way Marvel does it, because we got to get to Marvel money. No, Safran and Gunn are not being told that. And Zaslav is standing behind them saying, oh, no, we like their plan. We're excited for their plan. Lanterns is coming up. So there's at least solidarity there. But I do think Man of Tomorrow is the linchpin in this. I think if Man of Tomorrow does well, and mind you, I think that really what it has to do, you know, I've said before, you know, I said this on Vodka Stream a week ago, and there's a part of me that is reluctant to say it, but if we're looking at the current financial landscape, you know, from a subjective art form standpoint, it's not necessary. But from a business standpoint, it could be necessary for Superman to do what he has not done before, and that is earn $1 billion. You know, and he has not done that before, right? We've not seen a Superman film get to that. But here's, I think the pathway is there for Superman to do that. First of all, it will not have competition, you know, like Supergirl did, right? It's not going to be... first of all, Superman's more popular than Supergirl. It's vastly more popular, right? And when you consider that he was able to outgross 3 Marvel movies last year, however you feel about Captain America Brave New World, however you feel about Thunderbolts, however you feel about Fantastic Four, Superman still outgrossed all those films. It was the first Superman solo movie we'd had in 12 years. Superman is absolutely a character that the general audience will pay money to see in the theater, right? They won't wait for streaming like they've clearly been doing with Supergirl and Thunderbolts and other movies as well, right? So they're going to see him in theaters. So anybody that saw Superman last year, they're going to see Man of Tomorrow. Especially when you start seeing trailers, you start hearing that Williams theme again. They're going to see this one in theaters. And then people that are like, oh, wow, you got to see, they're going to grab more of the audience. Like, okay, no, we got to see this because the last one was awesome. There's not going to be any negative carryover from Supergirl because people are going to be excited to see Superman. Now, the people who see Supergirl, or people who saw it in theaters and enjoyed it, people who are seeing it on VOD now and will see it on HBO Max later and enjoy it, that may be another extra draw for them to go join the Superman fans on July 9th to see Man of Tomorrow in theaters, right? There'll be more of an impetus because you want to see it on the big screen as opposed to just waiting for streaming, right? So I do think that there is, and this is before getting to Brainiac, this is before getting to Green Lanterns and Lex and everybody else. I believe there is absolutely a path for Man of Tomorrow to be a billion-dollar film, and part of me wonders if it may need to do that. Truthfully, it may need to do that. It really need to make a stamp, if you will, because the thing is, it has to outperform. It has to do better than Superman, right? And when you think about it, Superman made $615 million. So will 800 million, will 8 to 900 million really do the trick? I don't know, but a billion would. A billion would do the trick. $1 billion, whether I like it or not, and I don't like it. I despise it in many ways because fans love weaponizing that shit. But $1 billion, that particular mark, absolutely from a PR standpoint, will make it very difficult for whoever is in charge of DC Studios to simply pull the plug on Gunn and Safran's plan. It will. Right? Because at that point, they'll be like, okay, now we want to see what happens next. And if Wonder Woman's in the movie, like if all this Wonder Woman casting stuff is true, and she's in the movie, well then yeah, you're talking about a big spectacle. And that could also be another thing, that leads to a path for Man of Tomorrow to make $1 billion. And I think they're waiting. I think they are waiting on that, truthfully. I really do. And it's weird because spring of 2027, I mean, the movie comes out in July. It comes out in summer of 2027. So I don't know what they're going to do as far as negotiating terms. But yeah, I do think they're waiting a bit on that. And if Man of Tomorrow succeeds, then I think then they're going to continue as planned. I really do. I think they're going to stay the course. And then maybe that's another thing that they're waiting for, Brent, truthfully, is they're waiting to see how the course goes, right? See what Supergirl does in HBO Max, see what Clayface does, with a smaller budget in October, right? Before deciding to, I don't know. I think Man of Tomorrow is the big catalyst, if you will, and I think if that film does well, it will be very difficult not to re-sign Gunn and Safran unless they really want out. And I know people have speculated that, oh, well, if the Paramount thing goes through, then Gunn and Safran are going to want out. I've never necessarily believed that, and I still don't believe that. And we'll see what happens because, Warner Brothers could be floating free again, depending on how things go legally, within the next 6 months, 6 to 8 months or whatever, before we get to the trial date for the antitrust stuff. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff up in the air, but at the moment, I think Man of Tomorrow is the big, like if it's a flop, then it'll be very difficult. I don't want to say that Gunn and Safran will immediately, go down with the ship, but I also have a difficult time believing that Man of Tomorrow is going to be a flop. I do, and that a lot of that is, it's not just like hopium, if you will. It's based on what Superman did, and it's also based on the power of Superman as a character. I think Superman, I don't think he is as popular of a character. He's not as popular of a character as Spider-Man. He's not as popular of a character as Batman. But he's close. Like, he's up there, right? I mean, Warner Brothers has made much more money with Batman than they have with Superman over the last 30, 40 years. But part of that is because they just didn't invest in Superman more than they could have, right? We could have seen the Nick Cage version. We could have had more incarnations of him than just 4 in the last 47 years or whatnot, right? So now you have an opportunity where you can actually see what he does in terms of financial viability at this point in time. I think most certainly he's one of those heroes that can do that. I think he absolutely is a popular enough hero to carry audience expectations, right? Here, let's say this, and I know you'll love this, right? What I'm about to say. As I've said for years that if BVS was the Ultimate Edition, that it would have made $1 billion, because all of the the critic score would have been higher, and all of the edits and whatnot that they didn't necessarily, that confounded a lot of the critics. That it wouldn't have led to the bad word of mouth, and perhaps the second week drop off doesn't occur the way that it does. How about this? Let's say that it was that World's Finest movie that you wanted, that many others wanted. Would that movie have made $1 billion? Very, very possible. Very possible it would have made $1 billion. I think what we're seeing now is closer of a potential for that, right? The way that the DCU is being structured, we know that when Batman and Superman are going to meet, it's not going to be like BVS. It's not going to be a grizzled veteran Batman in that sense, right? It's going to be different, because the DCU itself is different as a world than the DCU is, than the DCEU was, right? So I think that, knowing that Superman on his own, right? I don't think we've ever been in a position in the modern era to see what a Superman sequel would do after his first successful Superman film, and we're about to see that, right? Even though Man of Tomorrow isn't a straight sequel, it's still going to feature Superman. It's going to only be 2 years removed from the previous Superman film, so there we now have the potential to see what Superman can do with a second film, where he is in the lead, after a first one that was successful. We didn't really get that shot with Man of Steel. I mean, we did, but it didn't, because of the tones, because of all the divisiveness, polarization, whatnot, it was shy of $1 billion. This one, because it's more four-quadrant, I can admit that. Man of Tomorrow will likely be more four-quadrant, just as Superman was more four-quadrant than BVS was. I can admit that, certainly, right? I can accept that, I will say. So if you're talking about a more four-quadrant Man of Tomorrow, the path is there for $1 billion. I find it difficult. I would feel more on edge about Man of Tomorrow if Superman 2025, last year's Superman movie, hadn't done what it did. If it hadn't made over 600 million, if it hadn't beat out all the say it made Fantastic Four money, right? Say it only made up to that, so not necessarily a failure, but also not a real big hit. Say it didn't beat out Fantastic Four First Steps, right? Say it was 515, 520, while Fantastic Four was 525. Then I would feel maybe a little iffier, not a lot, but a little iffier about Man of Tomorrow. But getting to 600, getting within striking distance of Man of Steel's box office from 2013 tells me that I think Man of Tomorrow has potential to do better, and however much better it does, that increases our chances of Gunn and Safran continuing their DC Studios plan, which I hope happens. I hope that we do get to see their DCU continue. I don't want to see it get cut loose. I don't want to see them cut bait of it. And I think that a lot of people are massively overreacting to what Supergirl did. They are. They're massively overreacting to the choice of Supergirl being the second film. They're massively overreacting to what it ended up doing at the box office, because box office is not the end all be all. I think people are looking at it from a very traditional lens, and also looking at it from a very MCU coded lens, where I've said this before about how people that were steeped in the MCU, grown up on the MCU, believe that that's their baseline for the structure of a cinematic universe. So when they look at Supergirl and they go, well, what? That's not Batman. That's not Wonder Woman. What are they doing? They need to do the same thing that Marvel did, which, even if you look at what Marvel did, it still wasn't. I mean, you're establishing the Avengers, but they didn't have any of their heavy hitters. So it is kind of a comparable situation with respect to Incredible Hulk being your second film, although Superman is a bigger, more popular hero than Iron Man, right? So that's why the prospect of getting to, this will be the fourth movie, not the third movie, but the prospect of Man of Tomorrow doing better than Iron Man 2, much higher in that regard, right? So you could look at it financially and say, well, Superman outgrossed Iron Man. All right, so that wasn't even there, but then Supergirl did much less than Incredible Hulk did. Okay, well, I absolutely believe Man of Tomorrow will earn more than Iron Man 2. I do. And then you add the Clayface, whatever that movie makes in October. So I think there's precedent there for the DCU to continue and for DC Studios to continue under Gunn and Safran. I do. I think there's absolutely... I think the path there for them to continue and re-sign is clearer than the path that they don't. I do. I do feel that way. And I hope it goes that way, truthfully. I hope that we don't cut loose. I feel like a lot of this consternation is going to kind of get sidelined with Lanterns. I think Lanterns, you know, precedent says HBO series, DC HBO series. You know, we've seen the last number of them be very successful. We've seen Watchmen be successful. We've seen Penguin be successful. I don't think there's any reason to believe Lanterns isn't going to be successful. I really don't. And Peacemaker, also another one, successful, right? So I think that, quite honestly, the pedigree tells us that Lanterns is going to be successful and that that's going to be a big PR boost for the DCU, big PR boost for DC Studios and Gunn and Safran. And look, I hope, Brent, that Lanterns is strong enough for them to re-sign. I just don't know because of all the ownership hoopla and nonsense. We'll see. We will see. You know, depending on what Paramount decides to do in the next couple of months, knowing that they got to wait for a March 2027 date, we'll see if Zaslav is cool with extending their contract. I don't know. That might be a thing that happens. Maybe that's what they're waiting for, right? Now that I think about it, they could be waiting to see what Lanterns does on HBO, and then that will determine whether or not they get extended. But my hope, Brent, ultimately, is that they do get extended, and that if it doesn't happen as a result of Lanterns, then hopefully it will happen as a result of Man of Tomorrow being a huge success next year. So that is my hope. That is what I think those chances are, personally. So that was a long, comprehensive answer, but I hope I did answer your question. Thank you, buddy, for sending me that. I texted you a couple weeks ago, or a week or so ago, after seeing Brand New Day, and I said I never missed our old show more than I do now, because I do wish that you and I could have reviewed that and talked about that film, because that would have been one of our more glowing reviews. That would have been one of our more fun reviews to do, for sure. But hope everything is well with you, buddy, and thank you for sending the feedback, for sure. Always will read your feedback whenever you send it. So these last few responses for the return episode of Flight Chat are going to be from Threads and YouTube, because this is in response to a question I asked on the most recent episode of the FliteCast, which I posed this question for people who didn't listen. I posed this question to DC fans. I said, do you have MCU envy? Because it really feels like DC fans that are having second thoughts or doubting the direction of the DCU under James Gunn are doing so from a position of not necessarily embracing, you know, his creative vision, or not embracing it, but because they want the DC franchise, the DCU, to have MCU success, because they are envious of the MCU success that they have enjoyed for the past 18 years, right? Even through people calling them, you know, leaving them for dead during the multiverse saga, it doesn't matter. You know, they still make billion-dollar movies, and clearly Spider-Man Brand New Day is at the forefront, right, with respect to their success. So, do you have MCU envy as a DC fan? Is that something you need to admit, you know, with respect to your thoughts on the DCU? So we did get some answers, for sure. This first one that I want to read, a long answer. This is from an individual on Threads called Winged Leo. It looks like his name is Ricardo Victoria. Says he's an SFF, science fiction, fantasy, and horror writer, SFWA member, toy collector, likes TTRPG and theme parks, PhD sustainable design. All right. So Ricardo, Winged Leo, he says, oh boy, will this be a long answer. He says, no, I don't have MCU envy. I enjoyed most of its movies. Some don't. That's fine. I don't like the Marvel model outside Marvel. And having endured the mess that was the DCEU, sorry, I know you like some of those films, but it's my honest opinion, mid-movies with stellar moments, and I have a serious problem with Snyder's Randian philosophy, but I digress. I will 1000% prefer the creator-first approach of the DCU. We'll get to the comment about Snyder's Randian philosophy in a second here, Ricardo, because I kind of agree with John's response to you on that one, but I haven't muted you. But continuing with your thoughts, Ricardo, you said, it gave me my favorite movie, Supergirl, because I connected with it, the DCU, at an emotional level that hadn't happened since, well, Superman, and then not since Lost in Translation. And that's why I go to movies. I don't give a damn about the sports approach to box office comparisons, he says. If I wanted that, I would instead watch the Premier League or my National Football League. Box offices matter only regarding the continuity of a project, and that was only under the old model. Now with the streaming model, with streaming, the model is different, and we are just getting into it. Like in the comic side, I prefer to DC to do their own thing instead of chasing Marvel. When they do, like right now, they make amazing stories. Movies should do the same, and I again want to connect with the story, not make the box office record my whole personality. Which takes me to my next point, he says. I do resent Marvel fans. In specific, the Marvel Zombies kind of fan. They inject this insane discourse comparing box office with quality or narrative just to make its competition and jump into the very single thread to make their points in the most hateful way. When I worked on a comic store decades ago, they were the worst kinds of clients, and my boss said that those guys would kill the hobby one day, and he was an X-Men fan. I also resent the astroturfed hate Supergirl, Millie Alcock, the DCU in general got from armchair critics, Snyder Bros, and the media. It was unwarranted and unnecessary. I know the US is in the middle of a cultural war that is spilling over the world, but it's getting ridiculous. People define themselves for what they hate instead of what they like for internet clout, and that's a sad life. So no, envy no, sadness perhaps, he says, and hope that Gunn and Safran ignore all that and keep working on their 10-year plan. I leave you with one of my favorite quotes that changed my perspective in life when it comes to fandom and online life, he says, by, curiously enough, the guy that helped launch Millie Alcock's career. And the quote is, "We have tendency to define ourselves in opposition to stuff, but try to also express your passion for things you love. Be demonstrative and generous in your praise of those you admire. Send thank you cards and give standing ovations. Be pro stuff, not just anti stuff." That's a quote from Tim Minchin. All right. Okay, so, all right. Briefly, the Snyder Randian thing, that shit wasn't necessary to mention, Ricardo. I mean, okay, that's your opinion, and you had this whole thing where you said I have a different opinion based on what I've seen of his filmography. We can agree to disagree. I mean, I guess, but that's a pretty stark thing to accuse Zack Snyder of, seriously, especially in the current climate. So I'm really not going to take that lightly. So I would just say keep that to yourself going forward, because we don't need to get into those types of, unless dude pops off with a MAGA hat at some point. I guess we can talk about it then, but that's not going to happen. I'm fairly confident that's not going to happen. So yeah, we can leave any speculation and opinions on Zack Snyder's political ideologies to your damn self. I would just say that truthfully. But with respect to, and I don't care, like how much you enjoyed his films, never mind all that, your thoughts on the DCEU. Obviously, I enjoyed the DCEU far more than you did. I'm guessing more than likely, but I can find enjoyment in any of the 15 movies because I go to movies saying, prove to me that you're bad, right? I don't say, prove to me that you're good. I go into those movies expecting to enjoy them. But I do the same with the MCU, right? I probably enjoy the MCU far more than you do. But by the same token, I will agree with you that I do prefer the creator-driven approach, and I do hope that Gunn and Safran stick to it in the DCU, most certainly. And, like you say, with the streaming model, it does change things. I think that's a big thing that the Marvel fanboys and a lot of people aren't realizing. That when you have social media centered so much on hate marketing and centered so much on, I hate this, I hate that, and that's what the culture is of these YouTubers. That's what the culture is of these social media accounts and rage baiters. Like, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get people that hate shit. You're going to get people that are anti-stuff instead of being pro-stuff, right? I try very hard not to be anti-stuff. I'm anti-hatred, and I'm anti-being an asshole for the sake of it. I am anti-that. Now, I have asshole-ish tendencies, but I tend to reserve those only for other assholes. I don't reserve those for nice people or for people who are not assholes, right? That's just how I roll with that. That being said, like, there is definitely a culture of anti-stuff now and like people not being pro-stuff, and that makes it more difficult for content creators like me that want to be pro-stuff all the damn time. But it's not like I'm going to change my perspective on it. I'm going to be pro-stuff. I'm going to talk way more about what I enjoy than about what I don't enjoy. And right now, I enjoy the DCU. I enjoyed the DCEU because I'm a DC fan and I like being happy. I like enjoying my shit, truthfully. And there's nothing in here that leads me to want to, not enjoy the potential for what Gunn and Safran's plan can be going forward. The resentful part you're talking about, resenting the Marvel zombies, yeah, no, those people are awful. But there are zombies in every fan base. The ones that only believe in scoreboard mentality and really don't care about movies at all. They care about numbers. They care about money. They care about box office. They're not movie fans. No matter how much they want to claim that they are, they're not. Anybody that I've blocked so many people, and I will continue to block any idiot, and they are idiots. I will continue to block anyone out there that wants to tell me that a movie is better than another because of how much money it made. That is not how it works. Box office is a measure of popularity, not a measure of subjective quality whatsoever. Not even a measure of objective quality. There's no quality measurement with box office at all. Only the quality of how people spend money. That's it, right? And that's all a matter of popularity in that, right? So, yeah, I absolutely, as I've said, hope that Gunn and Safran, I do think that they'll ignore it, right? I'm not really worried about them ignoring the noise of the MCU. I think they're resolute in their plan. I am concerned more about Zaslav and the powers that be, them ignoring it. That's why I'm glad, whether they believe it or not, putting out public feelers, like public statements of support, with all this nonsense going around, about Supergirl being this and costing the studio this much money and whatever, right? Them saying, no, we are resolute in Gunn and Safran's plan, we believe in it. No, that part, yes. That we didn't see that back with the DCEU era. In the DCEU era, that was Jeff Johnson, John Berg, ordering 6 weeks of bullshit reshoots for humor and then letting a trailer company cut Suicide Squad to the point where we've only ever seen Studio Squad. We've never seen David Ayer's original vision. And then the Justice League disaster, right? That's what the previous regimes did. That is not what this current regime is doing, and hopefully it stays that way. So I think we agree on far more. I think we largely agree on all of that. No, it is not envy, right? Certainly not envy. I don't want the DCU to become MCU 2.0. I want it to continue with its creator-driven approach, because I certainly don't think 2 movies and a pair of shows is far enough into it to say whether or not it's a success. I don't. I think people are very lazy on social media. They're very lazy in fandoms in general, and they just find scapegoats whenever they run into something they don't like for whatever reasons. However, whatever the reasons are for disliking Supergirl and what it did at the box office. Whatever, it is what it is. So, but in this landscape, there is more of an opportunity for a movie like that to succeed, and more opportunities for projects in the DCU to succeed. So yeah, I think Gunn and Safran will stay the course. I just want David Zaslav to continue supporting them, staying the course in that regard, or whoever is in charge to do that. But thank you for answering the question, Ricardo. Looking forward to more answers or more feedback if you want to send it through threads or if you want to send an email, however you want to do it, sir. Feedback is always appreciated. And yes, we can completely agree to disagree vehemently about your thoughts on Zack Snyder, because he's not Randian. All right, this next threads reply comes from Andy Marquis, A Marquis 32 on threads, who answered the question. He says, as a DC fan, my answer to your question is I want to see DC movies on the big screen. Marvel's success sets the bar so high, and it seems like it's perpetual relaunches and soft relaunches. The only thing DC's made work for any sustained period of time are the CW shows. Also, resentment to some degree. Supergirl did not deserve this. I think I said this in a reply to another one of your posts. Everyone took out their frustrations over Disney Marvel mediocrity on Supergirl. Okay, so Andy, that part of it I would agree with you on. Now, Andy has been very outspoken, I'll say, on threads with respect to his belief strongly that the misogyny and the bigotry is really what torpedoed Supergirl. And he has been following all of the critic hate and all of the audience hatred, all the bad reviews and whatnot. He's been following that, and he believes that is the primary reason that Supergirl bombed at the box office. I still say, and continue to say, that it's the lack of knowledge, the lack of exposure and popularity for the character. The first solo Supergirl movie in 42 years, right? I think that she needed to be reintroduced to this new fan base, to this new audience, if you will, and I believe she now is being reintroduced to this new audience. And not that they will make a Supergirl sequel, but I think if they did decide to make one, it would make some significantly more money than that first Supergirl movie just made. I believe, truthfully, because I think some lessons most certainly would be learned from DC Studios in terms of how they released it, when they released it, and also the bigger lesson would be learned is the general audience would understand that she's not just female Superman, because they have a whole movie that they either saw in theaters in limited numbers or are seeing in VOD and online on HBO Max later on that will show them that, right? To know that Kara Zor-El is very different than Kal-El. But with respect to what you say about taking out frustrations, yeah, I did see that with the critics. Like when you see the critic reviews for Supergirl, And you see a lot of them, a lot of the complaints that they had, they're like, well, it didn't reinvent the wheel, it didn't give us anything new, it didn't do this, it didn't do that, because they'd seen so much of that in the Thor movies and the Ant-Man movies, and maybe even to some extent the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. And so, because they'd seen it already, a lot of times over 18 years through freshly rated on the Hell site Marvel movies, they decided, oh well, we can't allow DC to continue this, so we're gonna pile on DC. I do believe that DC absolutely gets more. Oh, they most certainly get more of a microscope, even more of a magnifying glass. They most certainly get more scrutinized than Marvel. There's no question about that. They absolutely get more scrutinized as a label than Marvel does. That's objectively the case. Seriously, how many movies did Marvel get freshly rated, even certified fresh for years before they got their first rotten one with Eternals, and then another one with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania? So you had to get into the 20s, the high 20s, before a single Marvel Cinematic Universe movie was rated rotten? Really? So you all liked the first two Thor movies that much? Really? You liked Iron Man 2 that much? Really? No. No, I think the critics most certainly scrutinize DC more than they do Marvel. So yeah, that part I will absolutely agree with you, Andy. I do think that they unfairly took out their frustrations on Supergirl. Because I've seen Marvel movies, go through the same template, go through the same formula that Supergirl did. Supergirl did it better. But, the Marvel movies get rated fresh. Supergirl gets rated rotten, per the Hell site, of course. But yeah, so that part I most certainly do agree. Supergirl didn't deserve that. Supergirl most certainly did not deserve that from the critics whatsoever. The weight of Marvel mediocrity, if you will, subjectively speaking, it is not Supergirl's fault. It shouldn't be placed on that movie's shoulders whatsoever. And it's unfortunate that happened, but thankfully, secondary market will help benefit her in that regard. With respect to the first part of what you said, you want to see DC movies on the big screen, it sounds like you want consistency. But you mentioned about how you said Marvel's success sets the bar so high, and it seems like it's perpetual relaunches and soft launches. So it does sound like you are envious of the consistency. Maybe you're not envious of the structure. Maybe you still want the creative structure. Maybe you still like the direction that Gunn and Safran are going with respect to how they're positioning the movies and the storytelling and building out the universe. But you want the consistency. So there is an envy of the consistency from that the MCU has provided, right? Maybe not so much, right? Maybe you don't need 3 and 4 movies and a couple of shows a year, but you want consistency with the project, because we have not seen that. You're right. Theatrically speaking, we have not seen that consistency. The DCEU got the rug pulled out from under it pretty quickly. Only a couple movies in. Snyder's stuff wasn't even done before they did that. And then it was all over the place with Hamada, and then it was kind of DOA, once Gunn and Safran took over after Zaslav and company came in, in 2023. So really that period was what, 5 years? Not even, because Aquaman I still think counts under the old plan. So really 2019, 4 years. 2019 and 2023, and then by the time we got to 2023, it was over. So you're right. The DCCW/Arrowverse has been the most consistent universe that DC has had in the last 15, 20 years. And yeah, so I understand, wanting to see consistency in that regard. That's what it sounds like you're saying to me, is that if you have any envy for the MCU at all, it's not for their creative style, it's not for their structure, but it's for their consistency. You want consistency, and maybe not even the Marvel level of consistency in terms of frequency, but just in terms of being consistent, being steady with a universe more than the DCCW/Arrowverse. I get that. That part I get. I do get that. He also posted, he said, my point about these movies finding second life on HBO Max is what so many are missing, he says. Supergirl's already found an audience just on VOD, and that's people paying $20 and $25 to see it. That is true. It's 100% true. Whether people on TikTok and other places want to admit it or not, that's there, right? And then, we've seen those posts like, wow, Supergirl was actually really good. I can't believe it didn't do well. I can't believe y'all let it bomb, that kind of thing, right? We've seen those posts pop up on social media, and we'll see more of them. I guarantee we'll see more of them once it hits HBO Max. And again, that's not just a DC thing. That's not just an HBO Max thing. We're seeing that with Masters of the Universe. We've seen it with Marvel movies like Thunderbolts and Brave New World, right? We've seen this with other franchises, right? So stands to reason we'll see it again with Supergirl. But there you have it. Thank you for your feedback, Andy. Thank you for answering the question. Looking forward to more feedback, good sir. Appreciate it. And there you have it, our first episode of Flight Chat in nearly 6 months. The feedback show is back online. People, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching on YouTube. Thank you so much for contributing. All of you that have contributed feedback through email, through threads, through YouTube comment section. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciated. We can keep this going. We can have some more talk. I want to hear some thoughts on Brand New Day. Definitely for those of you that are so inclined, and we'll get into further discussions as well. Some updated thoughts on movies, TV, and other assorted media that you guys want to rap about. If you want to talk about, continue the conversation on anything we talked about here, or if you want to add some more stuff into the phrase spoiler free, or not spoiler free, pardon me, spoiler filled. We can talk about spoiler filled stuff here all the live long day. You know where to find me on Threads and on Instagram at the FliteCast. Also on Blue Sky at FliteCast. There's also the FliteCast Facebook page, and of course that can be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. All right, take care, stay safe out there, and I will see you all next time. Take it easy.